Hello and welcome to Setting the Stage, episode 26, Matt and the Osee Pokemon region. We're doing something a little bit different with this episode where I'm interviewing someone that I reached out to based off of the podcast they run that's D&D, but set in the Pokemon world. So I think it'll be really interesting. Let's get to it. I'm here with Matt from the Osee Pokemon podcast here to talk with us about his campaign.
Hi, that's me. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Isaac. Excited to kind of get into it and answer any questions that you have. How's your day been, though?
My day was good. Today was the open house for my kids' preschool, so I took him to that.
Ooh, how fun. Exciting.
Yeah, and he figured out where all the trains were because he loves trains.
Oh,
He's 2.5.
see, good kid. That's a great kid. If you're into trains, by all means, you're going to live a good life. I wish I knew more about trains than what the general surface would be. It seems like that's like a whole world and hobby to delve into. How do you get into trains, if you don't mind me asking?
I had a set from when I was a kid, so I hung on to that,
Cute.
and then brought it out for like when he was around 1.
Mhm.
And he wasn't really into them then, but I just sort of stayed out since then, and he's got into them more over time.
Mm-hmm. Was it surreal? Like, I feel like this is like a definitely grade A parent moment where you pass on the toys that you had, and you're just like, oh, now it's your turn, my child.
Yeah.
Was it just a surreal thing to kind of experience?
I guess the interesting part for that for me is like which ones work and which ones don't.
Mm-hmm.
So the trains have been a big success, but like I have this wooden block set that I played all the time with when I was a kid, and they don't care about it because there's this new one that has like magnets in the blocks that we got them, so you can build more interesting structures because they're all magnetically attached instead of just gravity.
Is the creativity really pumped up just because of the magnets now, these new blocks?
I mean, there's not just that. The locks are also like, I guess it's just easier for them to build with. Like, there's one part, because they stick together, it's easier to stack them on top of each other.
Yeah, like a gentle breeze just won't undo, some of the work.
Oh, wooden blocks are pretty hefty. Like, that's not that easy.
Maybe.
It's not like those little cardboard ones.
Gotcha. Okay, I don't know what I was thinking, because usually when you think of wood blocks, you just think of like the generic wood block. Like, I guess everyone has like their own favorite wood block, because I was literally thinking of the arch or the half circle.
No, mine are ones that my dad made. They're basically just blocks of wood that have some holes in them to put dowels through them, and then there's some wheels that you can put on the dowels.
That's so, and excuse my French, that's so fucking cute. Everything you have to like add on to like every topic is so cute. I love it. It's like, oh yeah, my favorite's the one that my dad made for me. I'm just like, oh, my heart.
Yeah, no, it's really nice. He loves woodworking. He does guitar building.
Ooh.
For his retirement project now.
Oh, hell yeah.
Do you play a guitar?
No, my hands are too small. Surprisingly.
His are too big, so he has to play like a specific style that works with huge fingers.
Oh, I have heard of that, and I know some guitars will actually have like a thinner neck, right?
Mm-hmm. He tried building one of those, but like he'd gotten used to like the slide guitar style for big fingers, so he decided to just stick with what he already knew how to do.
Hell yeah.
Getting back to your campaign and the podcast, not everyone knows what Pokemon is. I know we think of it as like this ubiquitous thing, but that was kind of what I wanted to do first.
Oh, like the general concept of Pokemon?
Yeah, like you got these little monsters, they have like elemental powers.
Yeah.
And they like to fight each other when they're controlled by a person, but not necessarily in the wild.
I would even put a more innocent ideology about Pokemon. A lot of people, like, they're called pocket monsters because, like, you put them in a ball, you fit them in your pocket. Right. And they're capable of like destruction. Like, I don't know how Pokemon just haven't conquered human society in the anime already.
It's because they like being controlled by people, like I said.
I wouldn't say I mean,
Well, that's the thing. Like, the more you use your Pokemon, the more it like gets happy in the little ball, and you get like the little happy points in the games.
True. Okay. So they're little friends. They live in a symbiotic relationship. It's like a partnership.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I like to think of these little monsters who can definitely kill me at any point. My little buddies, my little friends.
Right. So you got this whole podcast about them, where you're recording, playing with. Who are you playing with in your campaign?
So my party is a very close group of my brother, who's 2 years younger than I am, my sister, who is 8 years younger than I am, Jenny, who is my girlfriend, my partner, who we've been together for 6 years now,
Nice.
and her sibling. They identify as gender fluid, so I want to try avoiding them a gender right now. So their given name is Bianca. So I guess we'll call them Bianca for now until they specify what gender they feel when they know.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, that's another thing too when it comes to characters, I guess, and exposure. We're very accepting in our own small community of having of just being an ally to the LGBTQIA plus. I think that's just how they're being referred now. I'm not 100% sure. Someone please correct me if I'm incorrect.
So the Q was always like a inclusive term that was trying to catch all the other terms that LGBT wasn't getting.
Mm-hmm.
So I know like the plus is this new thing, but I feel like it was never necessary. Q was already that plus, basically.
Yeah, I think people just wanted to also just be seen as well. So I mean, nothing wrong with that. I literally cannot say anything, being the cisgendered heterosexual man that I am.
Oh, good for you. But yeah, I feel like using queer as an all-inclusive term, I've never met pushback when I've used it that way, so I feel like it's still like works.
After hearing it so long being used as like a slanderous term, I'm always afraid to use it. So I mean, like, yeah, I'm always afraid to say what I can say, so I always just try to be respectful.
Mhm.
I look back at some points where I would say it as kind of like a joke and then just kind of cringe on it, just be like, oh, yeah, I've grown since then. And so I just try to be as respectful as possible without stepping on any toes, and be you be you.
Yeah, yeah.
If I could ask, how'd you kind of get into that role? Because that seems like a very generous, supportive thing, to kind of make your whole brand and content kind of like a magnifying glass for other people, other content creators.
I was thinking I wanted to do like a podcast that was like D&D associated, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to do a play podcast just because like my group didn't really like the idea of that in the first place, so it didn't make
Mm-hmm.
sense to push forward with that, and I wasn't sure that I could bring anything that was really unique within that sphere because there's so many of those right now of people copying Critical Role.
Yep.
And yours is unique, so that's why I was drawn to it.
Oh, thank you, Isaac.
What I did think is like, okay, I could do one about like my campaign world, but that doesn't have broad appeal, or I could do one, but what about everybody's campaign world?
Mm-hmm.
Because then it does get more of a unique aspect to each episode because it's not like a different, really in-depth part of my own stuff, and it can give more ideas for other people and give people a platform to present their work beyond their own group.
Yeah, it almost seems like you're kind of like a minstrel, like hearing the
Yeah.
tales of other people
Mhm.
and then just kind of and spreading them around, and I love that kind of vibe.
Yeah, well, I've really enjoyed it. The interview process is really cool. The editing process is a good way to review what it is, but it still like feels just more like work and not the fun part.
Yeah, I mean, because I guess that's how I feel about actually playing and recording, because we literally still play. I haven't updated the podcast in almost half a year now, and it's just, it gets so, there's times where it just feels so exhaustive, and with my work schedule and my attention span, unless I finally sit down and I kind of force myself to start. It's, I don't know, it definitely feels like a nostalgic trip, because a lot of the recordings that I have to edit now are from 4 years ago, basically when we first started, if not like 3 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, so we've been pretty much playing reliably ever since we started in 2019. We would play every week, but then, we didn't have the active decision to make it into the podcast, so I didn't have to deal with that until recently, a couple of years ago, when I was like, you know what? I just had a lot of fun during the session. I think other people might find it funny too, with the amount of chaos that just happened. So,
Why were you like? Because I think the first recording that's a live recording is like Fire Glove Forest or something. Were you recording before that?
Yeah. So my memory, and I've been, I literally just listened to a YouTube video, also kind of explaining the side effects and kind of symptoms of people with ADHD, and it's just a slow kind of realization that I might have grown up with that condition after being told for so long by my Asian mother, who's like, "Oh yeah, you're perfect, you're fine, nothing's wrong with you." But my memory has just been terrible for like the longest time, and I knew the little details of this campaign that I've been playing with with the party. I would forget. Like, I probably couldn't tell you most of the little jokes or little the fun things that we did in each adventure. So I decided to record it for my own posterity, just to have it and look back on it and just kind of give it a listen, just be like, we had so much fun in these little moments, and even if like we kept playing D&D, it would never match up to how fun and liberating it was to just be in that moment with everyone, just kind of ignoring the world for that little tiny bit and just pretending like we're going to be Pokemon trainers in this little safe bubble that I was making.
Right.
And yeah, it was more for, I knew it was going to be nostalgic because yeah, I don't know. Life always finds a way to have some people drift apart, and I kind of instinctually know it's going to be coming. So I figured, I'll just put my phone in the middle of everyone. I want to remember all this because it just warms my heart to have my siblings and my girlfriend and her sibling nearby, and we could just look back and kind of remember all of this fondly.
Yeah, I was wondering what you were recording with. I thought it was like an actual microphone.
So here's the thing. It's kind of crazy how the process really went down, because when we first started, it was literally just a phone, and it was meant for just us.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, I was like, hey, I really want to play music during this, because I would still play in other campaigns, and I was an avid listener of NADPOD, who had a lot of music, and that music just hits so hard, whenever you have a campaign and you got that playlist going and that song, the soundtrack just hits you so hard, it just intensifies the moment that much. And we had a couple moments like that in the Foxglove Forest arc, which was really nice, and I felt like it was really a nice emotional touch. So we upgraded to kind of like Xbox gaming headsets, where only one ear is covered and the other ear is open, with a mic attached to that.
Okay.
And then the phone ended up becoming a spider web of mic inputs.
Headset jacks.
Yep. And literally had to do a lot of experimentation for something that's so simple, like just put in the headphone microphone splitter and put those guys to a 1-to-4, male to female splitter, so we all have like individual, there's literally 8 wires conjoined, combining into one. And
phone doesn't seem like the right tool anymore.
Right. And we found out the hard way, because if you listen to some of the other episodes, like as we kind of go along, I absolutely do my best to try to get rid of the amount of feedback that we get, because I did not realize how bad this was going to be, because literally the electrical signal that comes from 8 wires plugged into one phone jack creates a terrible buzzing noise of electrical feedback that drowns out everything else. So we have a lot of moments and stuff where unfortunately it does suffer from that. And I finally bit the bullet, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to just start diving in. I've been listening to all these videos about what kind of equipment's going to be good, what do I need, what kind of microphones are going to be great. And I really tried. I'd struggled so damn hard to learn my best.
Yeah.
When it came, like, going into this like zero experience. So I guess for reference, I guess my degree is in design. So I would do graphic design.
Okay.
And just a overall design background. So I knew nothing about audio or audio engineering, and it was just a very painful road. So I guess finally got around to just biting the bullet, getting some dynamic microphones, because that was the thing that was really getting pushed. I've still yet to edit that just because it was like years. We had already been playing, and it's like pretty much a couple years of recording sessions that I'd have to get through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see.
And then once I kind of started, understanding more and more, I'm like, okay, let's try this microphone out. I'll spend like the $30 to $50 on Amazon for a microphone, and if I didn't like it, I would just send it back. And literally, I found one that I liked. I reverse engineered, okay, I have this microphone, what's going to be the best way to implement it, what kind of tech do I need to use. I got a mixer. I ended up upgrading that mixer thanks to the generosity of Professor Dogwood, my very own Mima.
Mm-hmm.
So she bought it for me just from the kindness of her heart, and I was like, oh my god, thank you so much, Mima. I always feel guilty when people buy me stuff.
Yeah, no, I know the feeling.
Oh, great. So ended up getting a really nice mixer, ended up just buying all the microphones, it's so funny too, because everyone in the moment was like, don't be spending the money if you don't have it. But I was like, I need for this to come out good. Otherwise, it's just going to eat me up that we're going to sound like poop. And I want to present something that's going to be nice and polished, and I don't have to do so much work to really fine tune it. Because the easier the recording comes out in the initial beginning, you already know it's going to be way easier for you in post.
Yeah, it sounds like with the headset setup that you have, if you have that linked to like a single computer that's also playing the soundtrack and you're recording the system sound as well, that'd be a great way to record everything.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and a computer would have been better. I think we ended up trying to use a laptop as well. There was literally, we use a speaker, we use the headsets with the microphones, we use a laptop.
Mm-hmm.
I literally tried everything to not buy the mixer, and ended up just saying, I'm just gonna do it at this point.
Yeah.
If I'm gonna be making this into an actual podcast, I need to do upgrades. They were very desperately needed.
Well, the podcasting subreddit's been talking about this a little bit lately, where like podcasting is a great way to like sort of get audio engineering as like a extra skill on your resume almost. So it sounds like you've got a lot more of that than I do, because mine is not really incorporating music or a very complicated recording setup like what you're doing.
I mean, it's not so much complicated. It's as long as you know kind of what you have to do, you're golden. The hard part is finding out what your specific situation is going to be, because no one's setup is going to be the same. And that's the really rough part. Like, I'm still trying to fine tune how to not have the players talk over each other or be heard from their microphones. So I'm looking into like microphone shields. I bought these huge long desk arms to get it closer to their mouth, because in the end, we're not podcasters and we're not entertainers. I just wanted to share the Pokemon adventure that we're having, and hopefully people would enjoy it. And while still making sure that everyone had fun doing it. And I guess the real reward is some people coming in saying, "Oh, we really like the adventure, but I'm always trying to pine for the approval of everyone that I'm playing with." Because Jenny still was literally talking about this in the car. She's a big fan of screamo music, so she has already kind of gotten inspiration from one of the story arcs and kind of connecting songs to that story. Something that I probably never have seen her do, but just to kind of hear her excitement when it comes to like, oh, I thought of this song, or whenever I hear the song now, I think of the story that we just did. And man, for me, it fits so well. And I just nod and I smile because I know I won't be able to fully understand like where she's coming from in terms of what that song means to her or what the lyrics are saying, because I don't understand a single thing when it comes to screamo music. And she has this innate ability, I think a learned skill, to just hear the words in all the screaming. And I'm just like, you're amazing. So yeah, I like the emotional impact that whatever I write for these guys to enjoy, just like a little piece of fiction, a little piece of story that really sticks with them, still is carried with them and always will. And she was telling me too, if she was like dying in the hospital, she would just she made a joke, I think, where she would just say the name of one of the characters. I'm like, that's insane. Remember, it's just a game.
I was thinking that's kind of like Citizen Kane or something like that.
Almost, but I enjoy when they really take it to heart. And I think that's what I think every DM should kind of shoot for. I don't know. Maybe that's just my own personal take. I like when everyone is getting impacted in the same way. It's almost like, I guess this is not the right term, but the first thing that popped in my head was like trauma bonding. You know, like if you're going not like mild trauma bonding.
Yeah, I know what you're going for there.
Like you're friends with your coworkers because you all work in a terrible office setting that you all kind of are mildly hating on, and that experience together is what kind of brings you closer.
Right.
Nothing tragic. You're gonna edit that out, right? Please.
Probably not.
No! People are going to think I'm psychotic. Isaac, please, I'm begging you.
I think people are going to know exactly what you're talking about with that.
Okay, I hope so, because man, it's so funny just hearing that out of context.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a newer feeling within role-playing games, where you want to have that kind of emotional connection with your character and with the experience, compared to like the old school role-playing games that evolved out of war games, where there wasn't really that connection. It was more just like
the big numbers game, the big kind of dungeon crawl episode where you try to get as much loot as you can get.
Yeah, you want the loot so you can be better to get more loot next time.
Yeah. I don't know if I can ever play that kind of game.
Well, I mean, that's what video games basically are now. Like, Diablo was like that, exactly.
I think I enjoy Diablo for different reasons. Like, I'm honestly terrified of the aesthetic of Diablo.
Well, yeah, it would be.
Yeah, I know. I think it's neat. I just have fond memories of me being a barbarian and just smashing my way through everything. My buddy was playing a monk, and we had one, I think, ranger. And whenever we killed anything and good loot dropped, he would be the last one, while the two melee characters just fight over whatever rare drop just dropped.
Yeah.
Much to the demise of our one range friend. And that's, man, I can hear him screaming bloody murder in the tiny dorm room. And it tickles me. That's what it does.
Yeah.
It's like a warm, fond tickle. I'm using very
Okay.
strange analogies.
Well, I mean, what you get in there is that there's fun ways to play both games.
Yeah.
You can still have fun playing that kind of like loot-based, selfish
Oh, absolutely.
style.
If you want to be a loot goblin, be the best loot goblin you can be. No takebacks, no prisoners. Get that gold. If that's you, you do you. Absolutely. I guess a quick question about you, Isaac. I guess when it comes to the games that you play, are you usually trying to get something out of it? Are you trying to invoke some emotional responses? Is it emotionally a high stake game? I guess I'm kind of curious because since this is the first time that we're talking,
Right.
I'd love to know what kind of player you are.
Well, I'm a DM
Mhm.
mostly. For the campaigns that I create for my players, I approach it kind of as creating a puzzle for them to solve.
Ooh, okay.
So I usually have my aesthetic is to have like a war set up, and they have to win the war, and they don't have as many troops as the enemies. They have to
I love that.
go around gathering more troops,
Yes.
and then have some sort of climactic confrontation.
Yes. I think you would love the arc that I'm currently writing up right now. It's literally I wrote myself into a corner, and I regret it, but playing it out has been very fun. And I guess I don't want to give too many spoilers, but it's exactly that, where there's a big bad banished from the Feywild, the Pokemon Feywild. So there's a slight difference. I don't want to get into it. I want to keep it all kind of a relative surprise.
The Safari Zone, right? That's the same thing.
I think a little more nuance in the Safari Zone. You're not throwing rocks and bait
yeah.
at everything. So they're basically all the kingdoms in here. They all have a certain type associated with them. They're getting wrecked by the big bad. So the party goes to each court, and my stupid ass. So there's usually 4 courts in the Feywild.
Oh, okay.
I decided to use, I think, 10, and I'll just list them out right now. So there's the fairy, grass, water, fire, ice, dark, ghost, psychic, and I feel like I'm missing one.
But you said fairy, dark,
ghost, psychic.
Ghost,
let's get those 4 out of the way. Grass, fire, water, ice.
That's 8. Dragon?
Dragons do exist here, although they're not. They're kind of more like ancient Pokemon that kind of live in this other plane of existence. They have a long they have a long history. I feel like when it comes to me introducing more dragon Pokemon to the podcast, they'll have a more significant and historical presence.
Mm-hmm. Rock or ground might be other ones.
I know because more spoilers here. The rocks have been invited to live in the ice domain, just kind of proving that it's like a harsh climate that they're going to be acclimated to. I think that was it, because I guess the only type that I'm thinking about is bug, and bug has this kind of neutral. Okay, so as a SoCal resident, this is going to be almost like the best way I can describe this is Disneyland. Imagine Disneyland is this fairy kingdom in the middle, and then there are several other theme parks around said Disneyland.
I mean, I guess that's how Anaheim is set up.
Yeah, so they're basically gathering troops to fight one of the domains that is teamed up with this big bad evil guy. And we're getting pretty close to the end after being here for, I think, coming up to 3 years, unfortunately. So we've literally been here longer than we've been in the actual region that I made.
Wow.
I know. I cry.
That's I always wonder, like, do you want to play that part where they come back and they don't have as much connection to their home anymore because they've been gone for like 100 years or something?
Yeah, I did roll to see how much time was affected. I did write in story reasons as to why or how they could kind of freeze that time so they're not gone for so long. Because I know some cases will be, an hour is a year, and it's just like, what?
Right.
because what I actually rolled on the Feywild table is 1 hour is 1 day in the material plane. So 1 hour in this Feywild is 1 day in the material plane.
Okay.
So they have already been gone for around 3 months.
Okay. So that's like a couple
Yeah,
years.
yeah. So I think time has passed up to the point where it's I think 72 or like I can't quite remember. It's somewhere around 3 months. So they're pretty much are like it's kind of like the speculation where you haven't heard from somebody in 3 months and it's just like, oh yeah, this terrible accident happened before they disappeared. They must have got caught up in it and they're MIA.
Right.
So we'll get into that mildly. And I am very excited to do that. But if I could go into more detail and just be like, oh yeah, so they got to go to this place to get these troops. They got to go to this place to get these troops, and accumulate their army for the final standoff, and then I think I'm still trying to work on army mechanics because I guess I'm curious about how you go about it. Inspire me, Isaac.
I definitely had a question about that for you.
Yeah.
Because I've listened up to like the first live recording that you did.
Oh, great. Okay.
For Fireglow Forest, because I wanted to at least get to that far before we had this and not have to listen to all 40 episodes or something you've done before I interviewed you.
Oh my god.
So in the Fireglow Forest, there's this point where they run into a bunch of Mankeys, and the way you set it up was that each individual trainer was facing off against one Mankey.
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious if since then you've done a swarm type for Pokemon.
I have. So what I'll do for that mechanic is, so a lot of the stuff I have to do is literally off the top of my dome, and if I really wanted to have like a reference or kind of a jumping point, I will check out official monsters. I'll do some mild research into kind of other people's homebrews and see what kind of what mechanics will fit. So I have done a swarm Pokemon. I've even given a small group of Cyndaquils to one of my players, and basically, if I treat their HP as kind of like a threshold about how many of those Cyndaquils are active in the swarm.
Yeah, of course, that's what swarms are supposed to be for
HP. So less Cyndaquils.
Some of them even have like a lesser effect after they get to half HP or something like that.
Yeah, so I basically have it where if you're going to be losing out on damage up until the last Cyndaquil, but they haven't used it that much because I think the mechanic might intimidate them a little bit.
Okay.
But I have done some swarms just because it just seems so thematically fun to just have like this huge swarm of Pokemon and be able to kind of a logical reason for a massive amount of damage with kind of technically one mechanically creature versus let me roll.
Right,
this guy hit, this guy didn't hit, this guy crit, and then I have to do all that math.
Right. Yeah. No, that's not fun.
Mm-hmm.
I was also just curious because I was thinking about, oh wait, there's Wishy-Washy too. That has to be a swarm type.
So when it came to Wishy-Washy, that was still when we were kind of in the very new beginnings. And when I say homebrew, I mean the bare bones. Because literally for everyone except one player, this is their first D&D campaign.
Okay, yeah.
And I think I was the most knowledgeable Pokemon person there. Like they mainly knew the names. 2 of them had no exposure to Pokemon at all. Ooh. The other, yeah, one of them. So Jenny has been playing a lot of Pokemon Go, and my brother had played up to Generation 4. So and that's the extent of his knowledge, and Jenny's always going to be getting the new Pokemon up to date, and I'm always around her to kind of nerd out when they come to releasing new Pokemon information or descriptions. So I would literally draft up a tiny character sheet with AC, hit points, the stat modifiers, not even the stat numbers, and that'll come back to bite me in the ass. and maybe 3 or 4 moves, like standard, like a standard amount that Pokemon games give you.
Yeah.
And to not overwhelm them. So literally when we were playing, Action Economy was fully out the window. They could kind of just do whatever, and I'd be like, "Oh, what does it say on your little sheet?" And this is when we would print out physical copies. I would send them the message in our little group chat, and they would write it down on these papers. And again, when I say bare bones, it's bare bones. Now, when I look at the stuff I make now, it almost seems too much. Like I'm overcompensating for the bare bones first approach.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious what you'd done for whether you were doing more of like each Pokemon knows 4 moves like in the games, or if it was like they know all the moves they know.
Here's how I treat the Pokemon. I treat them as if they're kind of like the Sorcerer class.
Mhm.
Given that, I'll usually use Charisma as the dump stat for kind of raw innate power or potential. That's kind of my take on it.
Right.
So they'll keep the moves that they learned. I think that's a nice nostalgic factor that kind of helps the player stay connected with the Pokemon. Because although we're imagining something different, they're still using the same move, if not, slightly buffed. So I'll usually, if they do something cool, if the Pokemon evolves or levels up, I'll keep that same move, but I'll treat it as if they're kind of casting it at a higher level, higher spell slot level.
Okay.
So instead of doing 1d8, it'll do 2d8. And I'll take
like cantrips already do that, right? So that
so
fits.
Almost every move is a cantrip. There's no limit on how many they can cast unless again, they literally revamp the whole action economy system to, I think, where it's almost kind of disgusting. So I guess to first address the moves, they'll keep the same moves. I'll reference what moves that evolved Pokemon might learn upon either leveling up or evolving, and just kind of give them that slight little, "Oh, hey, good job. Here's a new move. I hope you like that."
Right.
I hope, and if not from the actual canonical Pokemon kind of reference from their actual learned moves, what I'll do is I will either check Bulbapedia, which is fantastic, and see any features that are canonically described in the Pokedex. I will grant new features that would fit this new Pokemon, or a cool move that would also fit the kind of potential that they have, like any kind of signature ability that's not really shown in a signature move.
Okay.
They'll learn that for sure. And what I'll also try to do is I will analyze the Pokemon as a kind of objective point of view, just saying, okay, so this Pokemon looks like it has a lot of this stat and this other stat. So looks like this play style is going to be more geared towards a kind of glass cannon. Move fast, hit hard, not a lot of HP, give it a moderate amount of AC, and I will throw in a move, probably something from the 5e spell list, or maybe I'll just come up with something that's thematically correct for that Pokemon. Again, it's a mix of homebrew, actual Pokemon moves, tweaks on Pokemon moves, and a mixture of Pokemon moves and D&D spells.
Okay. So it sounds like it's much less systematic than I might have been expecting.
Yeah.
Because if you separate into types, there are sort of like distinct like move types that kind of fit. Like quick attack is the normal like quick attack, but then there's like ice shard is the ice version of that move.
Correct.
And they're exactly the same.
Correct.
They have the same power. They have the same like affix that goes on to them. They have the same PP that they get within the video games. So those are basically the exact same move. They just deal a different type of damage.
Yes.
You can make them be the same how they work in your game.
Yeah.
But sounds like you might be doing that, but might be also like freestyling it when you feel like you want to.
Yeah, because the nice thing is when it comes to moves like quick attack, right? Any Pokemon can be like, oh, I'm a speedster, I'm going to use quick attack. I would at least like to try to kind of differentiate that so not every Pokemon's going to feel the same. Like, let's say you have a Rattata versus an Alolan Vulpix. The Rattata's going to know Quick Attack. I would at least like the Alolan Vulpix to have something akin to a sort of slippery, icy Quick Attack. So instead of dealing the normal damage, I would just have it deal ice damage.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just call it, I don't know, like Icy Slide. Yeah, and thematically it would be different. I would describe it differently than a regular Quick Attack. Just to make it more kind of special to that Pokemon. So any move that I'm kind of designing, I will usually have full intention of, okay, this is for this Pokemon because they are this type, and kind of follow a generic category of kind of what this move entails. And I will take that move, I will put it with the rest of the moves that I've made. I've literally have like a page of like, I think 30-page Google Doc of all the moves that I've used categorized by type. And so if I ever need to kind of have something that fits the bill, I'll check that real quick, and if it's already there, I'll slap it on the next Pokemon.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's a great thing to have that type of organization for that.
And it's, oh my god, I think most of it's still unorganized, but I can definitely see past mistakes that I have done before. Literally, I gave Jenny a move that does 8d10 for the equivalence of, I think, like maybe level 3, level 4 players.
Okay, and that's like a 5th level spell.
Yeah, I was just like, oh my god, the amount of damage that you're outputting with 8d10 is very wild to me. But the only reason why I had it as 8d10 was because it's the move Leaf Storm, and I would reference that move, and I think the base power it does is 120. So I think it was originally 12d10, and I had to nerf it to 8 or something like that, just because the amount of damage that it was outputting made it where my evil Pokemon, are immediately just vaporized,
Right.
if they're weak to grass.
I mean, that kind of fits with what you would get for having a move like Thunder at like level 10 or something on a Pokemon. Like, yes, that's going to... Stats don't really matter at that point. It's just the base power of the move is so strong.
I guess that's a good way to look at it, because I think if I look at it mechanically wise, like it's an actual video game, I feel like it loses the storytelling impact, right? Because if you want the DM to give you a strong move and describe it strongly, like if I were to describe Thunder, I would just say, oh, yeah, so you see dark swirling thunderclouds begin to conjure above you as you feel the hairs on your skin begin to prickle and dance with the new static electricity that is being formed from this insane thunder move that you're about to use. You look at the target creature, I don't know, let's say a Caterpie.
Oh no.
Yeah. You look at this Caterpie, static crackling from your eyes as they glow blue with energy. You point and you say, and you whisper the move, Thunder. And a crack of lightning just bursts from the sky, from the heavens above, as this Arceus wore a zap plate to decimate this Caterpie that stands before you. And I feel like it's more fun just to go really all out. And I know my brother would love the descriptions that I would give, just because of how insane that these moves would sound.
Yeah, it's very evocative.
Yeah, but like for the most mundane reasons, and it's the small things like that that give us just so much joy. Like casting Thunder on a Caterpie has to be dramatic. For me, it has to be, because if you just have like, oh yeah, you cast Thunder on the Caterpie, it is now Ash.
Right.
That's funny in its own way. I just like to embellish, really hype it up, and then just have the subversion just really just get you in the gut and make you laugh.
So we've been bouncing around a little bit on mechanics. I guess one of my other we can stay there, and I got other questions about like the campaign setting too.
Yeah, sure.
So do the Pokemon level up at all, or do they just kind of stay where they are and then evolve at some set point?
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I kind of ran into this problem before because I would like to kind of treat all the Pokemon individually at kind of these story checkpoints. So we don't have any sort of experience systems. I think having that would just overcomplicate and just give way more math than it should, just because
Yeah.
at that point, you're having to calculate the EXP gain yield for, oh, let's say a player just, from instead of my long rest, can I just go into the forest and use thunder on a bunch of Mankey? And I just
Right.
go, okay, yeah, let me just calculate how many Mankey you decimate and how badly you affect this ecosystem.
Right. Yeah. That's not fun in regular D&D either.
Yeah, so I'd really like to avoid that. We again, it's all kind of theater of the mind, and the emotional story checkpoints is really where players and their Pokemon can shine, in my opinion.
Mhm.
I am very guilty of saying yes to the trainers doing something kind of mundane or not really relevant to the plot and just be like, "Oh, that was a really good roll. Can my Pokemon evolve?" They're looking at me with these big old puppy dog eyes, and
Yeah.
they know they know they can play me like a fiddle, Isaac. All right, it's not fair. I always
I
cave.
gotcha.
Yeah. Be stronger than me, Isaac. Be strong. So, yeah, literally, I will say, yeah, I guess that's fine. And they'll be like, yay! And they're happy in the moment.
Right. Give your kids that piece of candy.
Yeah, I gotta give them some candy. I literally have to, just because they're so patient with me and all this homebrew bullshittery that I do. Because literally, I will say, "Hey, that move's too strong," or "I'm gonna make this move into a bonus action, so you don't spam this other move as well." Uh, it's a lot of balancing, a lot of hot fixes that I kind of have to do. Everything's kind of imploding and collapsing in on itself, and I just have to kind of patch little issues here and there.
Yeah. I think every system like this has to have that.
So they're always so patient with me, and I just kind of throw them a bone every now and then. And I'm also guilty of using evolution as kind of a plot point, and that really kind of robs the player of enjoying their new evolution. In one of the first arcs, in the Foxicle Forest arc, they actually meet Ho-Oh.
Yep.
And Jenny's Oddish, I think, already now a Gloom, and she's only had it for, I think, maybe in real life 1 or 2 sessions, and she wasn't able to fully enjoy the Gloom before they decided to evolve. And we've come up with a reason to kind of, it would be part of her personality that she would kind of feel responsible of shouldering a burden that no one else should be trying to take on. So with that, I get to explore more plot points, but she has already expressed a kind of sour taste in her mouth, like, man, I didn't really get to enjoy Gloom, and I love Gloom. And I'm like, damn it. And I'm much more careful now, but I can't be too careful where I rob the players of the magic of evolution, because sometimes they'll drool for it.
Well, what if they're like, in the video game they press B,
Yeah, they can, but usually they don't. Like,
Okay.
they're just so hyped, because in game time, it's probably been like 5 days. In real life, they are so much more impatient. They're like, "Oh yes, it has been." Oh, I guess more patient, because it'll have been like 5 months, and they'll be
Yeah.
like, "Please evolve."
Give me that piece of candy.
Yeah, give me that candy. And they start looking at the whole bag, and they're just like, more evolutions. But we definitely had some evolutions where, although I hadn't planned for it, in the moment, in a very cinematic way, they do evolve, and those are probably the more memorable.
Mhm.
And I try to strive for more of those. And recently, I actually started experimenting and doing more research into kind of expanding into regional forms and kind of even going further than a regular evolution. So a two-stage evolution could literally have an undiscovered third one, and I will write in some mythos about why that is, tying
Mhm.
in a lot of the cultures that kind of inspire me and kind of make our group this kind of, I guess, uh a true minority. So literally I'm Korean. I play with my siblings. We're also just almost fully Korean based off my brother's 23andMe. So a lot of, and we've always kind of felt disconnected with the Korean culture, kind of growing up in America.
Yeah.
Okay, and hopefully my mom doesn't hear this, but she's very she's very hardcore Christian. So anything that's shamanistic or unchristian like, we had no exposure to.
Uh-huh.
And it fascinates me to kind of learn about this whole history and tradition and culture outside of that Christianity kind of circle. So I love drawing inspiration from like these weird rituals. I believe they're called gut rituals, where uh they'll have like some process or they'll praise a certain god, and I inadvertently base it off a Korean god that already exists. And I had no idea. I literally stumbled across it doing some research for something else, and I was like, "Oh my god." I literally just plagiarized some some Korean story.
Well, that's pretty cool, though.
Right? And is that like coincidence? And it just like blows my mind about how that kind of happened. And I will also try to draw on a lot of Hispanic culture, a lot of Latin American culture.
Mhm.
Jenny and her sibling are, half Mexican mainly and half El Salvadorian. So I'll try to draw a lot of cultural inspiration, if not, fun little stories from both cultures, from the Far East or Latin America, and try to make it into this Californian take on both of them to
Right.
kind of represent Orange County, the county that I kind of started this whole adventure and based the whole region off of.
Yeah, yeah. I remember you talking about that in one of
Yeah.
the episodes.
Yeah, just a nice fusion of all these cultures kind of blended in together. The reason why I have the three-stage evolutions, I base them off the mythos, have my own take on it with heavy inspirations from the other cultures, and that kind of helps
Gotcha.
them make them feel special, just for us.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Cool. I guess one of my other questions, like for stats for the Pokemon, so you mentioned like charisma.
hmm
I was thinking you might have done like a direct transfer of like their game stat lines with some sort of formula where like attack goes into strength
hmm
and speed goes into defense
hmm
or speed goes into dexterity, defense goes into constitution, and then special attack, special defense go into the mental stats in some way.
Because that was like exact. So I did exactly that, and you bring up a nice point of where do I separate intelligence versus charisma. So I literally had to kind of do some mental juggling when it came to that, because I did have special attack direct correlate with intelligence, because that seemed to make the most sense.
Mhm.
Then I this is how busted the stats are. I think at some point Jenny had a Blossom, and I think it had like plus 10 intelligence.
Yeah, yeah, I think I remember that in the
Yes.
Foxglove
Yeah,
Forest
so
episode.
it's an insane amount by regular regular D&D context.
Right.
And to kind of remedy this, I was like, "Oh, yeah, whenever she does talk in her Blossom native tongue, it sounds very very eloquent when translated." And that's when I kind of knew I had to find a different stat to kind of allocate this to. And I believe I was listening to maybe people reasoning about why charisma is actually appropriate for sorcerers. And here's my solution to that. Anything elemental, anything that really wasn't kind of derived from intellectual capability, I use charisma. And I'll use charisma as a sort of raw innate power that is within each creature, each Pokemon, that continues to kind of grow. because I feel my reasoning is sorcerers. I like the reasoning that sorcerers are kind of innately good at magic. They have a talent for it, and they can only hone in that talent. And I feel the same thing goes for Pokemon. If they continue to train the moves with the power that they have, it's only going to go up.
Right.
So usually I will reserve the intelligence stat for a lot of psychic, Pokemon, which naturally makes sense.
Yeah, Alakazam is supposed to have like 5,000 IQ or something.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely, and I'm not going to do that any injustice. I want to make the smartest Alakazam that the party's ever going to meet.
Right.
And I think they've already met one in our second Halloween special. It was a spooky one, and they had a kind of a corrupted sense of intelligence. So it was a very fun take about how this incredibly intelligent Pokemon now has kind of motives that we cannot understand. And there's always that kind of fun take that you can always do with the stats.
And the other mechanical question I had was about like the trainers. You mentioned like Poke Lore in the episodes for them having that for rolling. That seems like a very important skill to have proficiency in.
I had them traditionally roll out stats like a normal D&D character. The 3d6, take off the lowest, that's what you get. And they had regular stats. They were kind of wieners compared to their Pokemon. Meaning, it's supposed to be a system about battling with Pokemon. And if you get hit, things are going to kind of get tough. So you're going to have to really rely on your Pokemon.
Right.
And eventually it got to the point where, they started meeting more evil bad guys who are just like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to try to hurt you and your Pokemon. And they would just go down so fast. And that was causing a lot of kind of, rubbing them the kind of wrong way. And I know Kurt Mitt, this kind of big dude, taking the same amount of damage as a 16-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Just kind of, it's like, oh, it's very anticlimactic and it doesn't seem to thematically fit. So had to do some hot fixes there. I did not have skills for a very long time. I literally would ask them, what is your profession before you became this sort of trainer with the call to adventure? And I would give them skills based off what profession they chose.
Okay.
And
seems reasonable.
Yeah, so they were very specialized in that kind of manner. They could kind of help rely on each other for, oh, Jess is the smartest. Let's ask her if she's kind of heard about this during her time at college or any sort of medical knowledge. Oh, right. Jenny is good at floral arrangements from her job as a florist. Maybe she can use her sweet scent ability to attract some Pokemon to come by.
Okay.
So little kind of fun things like that were added. But for the most part, I think the minimum HP that they had was, I think Jenny at one point had like 9 HP. Like you could sneeze on her and she would just go down.
Okay, so that was another question I had, was like part of, like Pokemon has so many different versions of it within the different media that have been released, and people are used to like the video games and the TV show as their main thing. And the video games, obviously, like the person is never threatened. Like nothing ever happens. Like you block out if you lose, and that's kind of it.
Yeah.
And in the show, Ash is like, if you look for the different like things people pointed out about him, he's basically a superhuman.
Oh yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah, he gets shocked by Pikachu how many times, and he's fine, and he's able to lift like 70-pound Pokemon with like no problem in front of him. He's like 10 years old, so it's like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, Ash is low-key just a monster in my head canon.
Right, so it's like there's nothing that can really actually threaten Ash outside of like Mewtwo.
Where he actually canonically dies for a little bit.
Right, yeah, exactly. And then compare that to the Pokemon Adventure comics, where Red is very much in mortal danger in a lot of his fights.
Yes.
So I was curious, like, where you were going with that, and I got the feeling from like the first episode or two, where like that Coopereye guy that kills Lugia, that you were going more for the trainers are under threat.
Oh yeah, 100%. I strongly endorse the Pokemon manga when it comes to a real good Pokemon adventure. It was very captivating, and it's so much grittier than the actual anime, and I love it so much because I think that's actually in an interview that's how they wanted the Pokemon adventure to kind of feel. It was a very high stakes, very dangerous job that not a lot of people were willing to kind of sacrifice their whole career and future to do.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of Pokemon that die in that.
Mm-hmm.
Red is like missing for a while, and it's pretty much assumed that he died, that he froze to death.
Yeah, they find his frozen statue and actually was able to get out. I also remember vividly Blue, or no, I think his name is Green. Green's Charmeleon just full on slash.
It's Blue. Green's the girl.
Oh, is Green the okay? So Blue literally his Charmeleon just slashes into the Arbok, Koga's Arbok, and you just see like the meat of the hood, and I'm just like, oh my god, that's grotesque.
Yeah, no, I remember that one too. That one's very visceral. Like you can see like the organs of the bones,
right?
And the severed head next to it.
Oh my, yeah, it's not like visceral, you know. It's definitely gruesome, but like on a kind of PC, you know, scale. Like it's not like a realistic gruesome fight. It's cartoonishly gruesome, which I think is like
it's not what you'd expect from like a children's comic. Like you'd never see that kind of thing in a Disney. So we're talking about Southern California.
Yeah. You never see that in a Disney film, but you won't see the beheading of a beloved legendary Pokemon in a Disney film either, unfortunately.
No.
It's usually off camera. So I think that's a nice. I don't know. I get a lot of inspiration from just manga in general, and the ones that usually kind of have the great hooks are the ones that usually take a huge turn for the worse. Like everything's so happy-go-lucky, haha, we're having a great time. Mm-hmm. Oh my god. Just the kind of stop dead in your tracks as you kind of realize the gravity of the situation, both looking forward and back, about how horrid what the players are just kind of exposed to and how high the stakes get raised immediately.
Uh-huh.
I feel it's kind of an overused hook, but when it works, it works. It really just kind of drags you into this world where, you know, you don't know what to kind of expect next. Like, how far is this evil guy going to go? How would the party kind of react to this huge gruesome thing that most people would just become honestly like sickened by at the very thought of? And I've actually run into a little bit of controversy when it came to that first scene, unfortunately, just because a lot of people just go like, Pokemon's not like that. You know, they should be having like a little fun adventure.
Well, I feel like you get to that later.
Yeah. Because we started that. We started that way, obviously. Like, oh, you're in a town. Oh my god, there's Zubat flying around. Haha, get the Zubat.
Right.
I think that was my biggest pet peeve when it came to Pokemon Adventures. The stakes were almost like insultingly low. It just seemed like it was like a nice, fun time with no real stakes. It's like, oh, kind of like a Monster of the Week, or hey, here's a fun little new mechanic to kind of explore, and let's just all have a nice time. And you know, we're just going to do this at our own pace, and there's going to be no overarching theme or story element to this. We're all just having a grand Pokemon adventure. And I was just, I don't know, I had an itch that needed to be scratched so badly when it came to Pokemon content like that.
Suppose.
I don't know. I feel like there could have been some better way to kind of introduce the death of a legendary, as opposed to kind of, oh, off camera they fought and you guys stumble upon this heinous act. You know, there's always going to be a better way to approach these bigger topics. But I think when it came to, you know, Pokemon fans who were looking for an adventure, you know, upon hearing, oh, here's a Pokemon D&D playthrough, as if there's not a dime a dozen of these. As soon as you hear that first episode, it's like, oh, that is new. I don't know if I like that. Let's see what the next one kind of entails.
Right.
And kind of looking back at it and the kind of future plans that I have, it really ties in with the theme, the overarching motifs of the story. And so not only is the kind of region based off Orange County, I think I put some other elements of kind of, I guess small spoiler is when it comes to life and the situations and every bad and good aspect that's dealt with it, how will you respond? How do you live your life knowing, because some people will die a death that came too quick and they feel unfulfilled. Some people die too early and have no regrets. And the kind of dynamic and story is very interesting to kind of explore, especially when, I introduce, hey, Lugia got beheaded first episode. That should be, an end game thing, but it's still symbologically the beginning of an adventure. So kind of looking back at that first episode and the first decision I made, I don't know, I try to help tie it into this whole overarching life journey that that the players, NPCs, and anybody has to take in this region. Starting with the death of a beloved legendary. And spoiler alert, if you haven't listened to it, Lugia does come back after.
I don't think there's much to hide there. You said they found an egg in that same one.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
So they have an egg hanging around that's a Lugia egg.
Yeah, because I don't know. I like the philosophical belief that the end is never the end. Bad times always end at some point. You're never going to have a bad day that's going to last forever until the end of your days. You will always stumble on one good day that will break that spell, and there's always going to be kind of hope, coming along. Whether or not you keep a positive mental outlook on that, waiting for that kind of hope to flourish and fruit by meeting new people, by meeting new experiences in the face of death, that's just kind of life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, for tying it back to Bible stuff, it's like the Solomon's ring. This too shall pass.
Yeah. There's, I think, a surprisingly large amount of biblical references that I'm trying to make as well throughout the whole campaign as too. Just because, in the end, overarching themes of life and death are very prevalent in the current campaign now.
On the death and the rebirth of a legendary mystical creature.
Yes, and I also introduced some more elements that kind of help solidify how much life and death really play into this. And if you really, this is for the listeners, Isaac. All right, if you're really curious about how life and death really kind of tie in, do some research into Korean mythology. I'm not going to give you the name. There is a Korean god that's based off life and death somehow, and you're going to find out more details about it. And DM me. DM me if you find it. I'll be like, yeah, you got it, man. Here's a candy. You pick a Pokemon. You can evolve it.
Oh, boy. Rare candy. Get to evolve my Pokemon.
Oh, yeah. You get a rare candy. Evolve your Pokemon. Good job, man. Get out of here.
Well, I had another question about like the mechanics. Did you take anything from the card game for how you were designing like your approach to setting everything up?
I do like the names of the card moves. They are always so very interesting to me. And yeah, I have taken some moves where, like a tail whip, right? You whip your tail around, and the name of it should imply that, hey, you literally use your tail as a whip. But in the game, it's just, oh, you lower their defense. And that itself kind of is very hard to translate in D&D terms. Mm-hmm. So I will usually combine a certain effect and a tiny bit amount of damage. Like, it's not a crazy move to learn. Anybody with a tail can pretty much learn this move. But it lies on me to kind of have to translate it more into D&D terms.
Yeah, like they grant combat advantage for a few turns afterwards or something.
Yeah, because I think what I would basically have it do with my current knowledge right now is basically, target creature does a wisdom saving throw. Here's the DC that's going to be based off how fast I guess your Pokemon can move their tail and how distracting it can be. And I feel like that's a nice little advantage to give to Pokemon who are just really fast. It's very funny to see a Pikachu who maybe has like a +4 to Dex be able to metronome their tail a lot faster than a Slowpoke.
Right.
So a little bit of damage, advantage probably on the next attack, or something along those lines. Point is, thematically, have it still do something the same intended effect as in the game, but also take inspiration from this little card that has Tail Whip, maybe do like 20 damage, and just be like, okay, this seems like a minuscule amount of damage that's kind of like you're gonna nickel and dime your opponent just for kind of shits and giggles. Let's have it do a tiny amount of damage so the player also feels rewarded for doing that and also helping out their friend set up their next attack. And that was kind of a hard thing to balance too, just because they want to do damage. Any player who is new to D&D, they just go, I want to roll as many dice as possible, and I want to make sure that I can contribute my weight to this fight by dealing damage. So a lot of the moves that don't deal damage, it was very hard for me to convince them, hey, maybe you should try that tail whip move that, back in the day probably, it lowers the target's AC by 1, which is kind of busted a little bit. And they'd just be like, no, I'm just going to use powder snow for the millionth time. I'm just like, oh my God damn it. Yeah, okay, yeah, you do powder snow.
I mean, that's sort of going along with what the games do too. Like Tail Whip sucks; everyone removes it.
Right? It's just like, oh my God, and I feel bad for Tail Whip, because if Tail Whip was a person, that's the kid who you don't invite to come hang out with you, and it's not their fault. That's just how they are. Give them like a pair of shades, as in the form of like 1d4 damage or as a bonus action, and suddenly, hey, Tail Whip, come hang out with us, come eat lunch with us, come sit with us, and they're just like, oh, thanks, guys. And even Tail Whip gets a chance to shine, and I think we should be doing that to all the moves. Every move deserves love. Every Pokemon deserves that kind of love as well. Even if I personally don't like them in the game, like I have a big disdain for Poochyena and Purloin. Sorry, Poochyena and Purloin stands. But in the game, they just suck. They don't do any damage. Every time I have to fight them, I'm like, okay, these guys are chumps. But in the game, in the D&D game, I will at least take time to read what they were supposed to be, what they're supposed to represent, and make them better in that aspect. So everyone's Pokemon can at least feel appreciated,
Gotcha.
seen, and can be like, oh, that's awesome. They even got this little tiny detail about their habits right, or how they travel in packs. I try to go as thorough as possible when it comes to making sure that this Pokemon stands unique versus, all 1,000 Pokemon. Because that's all you can do. If every Pokemon knows Tail Whip to some degree, it's like, okay, that's boring.
Right, yeah. Makes them feel less interesting if they're sort of homogenous that way.
I'm a big fan of little Pokemon being on equal footing as the big, tough, strong-looking Pokemon.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of what the show does. Like, Pikachu is always relevant, even if he really shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Beating Brock is just stupid, but, the show wanted it to happen.
Yeah, as much as I hate Pikachu's, like, blatant nerfing and, repetitive power scale that everyone has seen over and over again.
Right.
I do appreciate the Pokemon like Bulbasaur and Squirtle who refuse to evolve and are still, Bamfs. They can still hold their own. They are amazing to a certain degree without having to, physically change themselves, and they're not punished for it. I will still watch the episode where Bulbasaur uses Solar Beam to save Ivysaur, Bulbasaur, and the Venusaur, and it still gives me goosebumps. And I love that kind of this is your moment kind of deal. And I never really push my players, going back to the evolution, I never push them to have to feel like they evolve. I always also try to do a double take on them, just saying, hey, let's see if your Pokemon wants to evolve, and give them an in-game, in-world reason as to maybe why they don't want to evolve.
Okay.
Because I want every Pokemon to feel like they're their personality is also unique. And that's really hard when, I have to basically balance human NPCs, Pokemon NPCs that can talk, and all give them a personality, even though some Pokemon are completely have the inability to have a proper conversation. So little details like not wanting to evolve kind of go a long way in terms of showing what kind of character they are.
Well, I had a final mechanical question before we
Yeah.
got more into like more about the like actual campaign
Sure.
group dynamic. Was the game has all these sort of like key aspects that I feel like show up a whole bunch. Like there's the bicycle or the water route or like a map that shows the whole region that you get to sort of like backtrack on to previous sections later on in the game. Part of that is like key items, like you need to go get the Sylph Scope so you can get into the Ghost Tower in Lavender Town.
Yeah.
So do you have like that sort of backtracking and that sort of like same tropes that each of the games has?
We have backtracked a little bit, but they have found some key items every now and then, here and there. I feel like that's kind of counterintuitive for my players, at least. Just because when it comes to the Pokemon games, it's kind of like, oh, this is a puzzle you have to kind of explore, and it's just you. Versus, every DM runs into the issue of having to search for puzzles, thinking, hey, this might be fun for my players to solve. And it's pretty easy, once you get a good handle on it and start connecting the dots. And then you spend the next 5 hours around the table, not one step closer to solving this puzzle that was
I don't use puzzles in my game anymore.
Right? It's so traumatizing. It's so traumatizing. Because I've also just sat around a table just like, I think it's this. And everyone just goes, no, it's not that. It has to be this. And everyone has their own take on it. I'm just like, oh my God. But
yeah.
I try not to have them backtrack too much. And especially with a kind of developing story arc with the big bad and how they kind of have to thwart the evil plans as they go along. The exploration, like the winding routes, the tall grass, the really tall grass, the wooden bridges. Right. But I feel I want to do those justice by really making sure that the landscapes that they do go to are very unique and very different from each other, while still also basing them off of kind of real places, either in the world or in California.
Right.
Because California just being one of the most geographically diverse locations in the entire world is something that, I can't afford to not use. I will do my best to kind of describe every rugged landscape, because that's what the whole Osee region is. This huge untapped land that the Indigo League could not kind of dip their toes in if they really wanted to either get resources or put their footing in here to give the Osee region a proper infrastructure, which is why, cowboys kind of exist here. That's my canonical reason why cowboys are still around, because I see the Indigo Plateau as a sort of bureaucracy that establishes itself in different regions, and the Elite Four is just kind of like a sort of committee that also kind of helps facilitate who is worthy of the gym challenge, who is kind of worthy to help run this whole region that we have, sources of income, infrastructure like Pokemon centers, Pokemarts, and and whatnot. Yeah, every landscape that the players are going to go to, always going to feel like they're going somewhere new, always going to feel like they're kind of exploring. I'll throw in little kind of hidden gems every now and then, like, oh, you find some Pokeballs that looks like a trainer didn't use. Yeah, just kind of like little fun things that aren't really plot related. And if they are, I will make sure that it's a big deal. So any key items that they find, I believe in one of the adventures, they defeat this sludge monster that was actually a product of experimental testing on it. So they find a broken vial, and it has the Cooper Eye symbol on it.
Of course.
So I figured that would be kind of a key item that you would find in the in like a regular RPG game that's not Pokemon, because and it tells a story on top of that. So not only is it kind of like a breadcrumb to what could be kind of possible later on. I guess a mild spoiler, they do find something like a key item that is very almost kind of game breaking that they also kind of have to take responsibility for.
Oh, okay.
So the only thing is, my players are terrible with items. Like, I in regular D&D, when you get a magic weapon or magic item, you're like, hell yeah, I'm gonna attune, and this hopefully might be my new signature thing. Or hey, in this bag of holding, I have these magic items that might come
Right.
in a pinch.
Yeah, classic hoarder.
Yeah, and it's hard when you're also having to juggle weapon effects, magical weapons, and then on top of that, you have to now juggle a whole roster of magical creatures. I'm going to click on one character's Pokemon list that they have.
Okay.
And tell you how many Pokemon they'll have to kind of remember. So they have 42 Pokemon.
Oof.
Yep. And here's the thing. Not only do they all have most likely more than 4 moves, they will usually have a plethora of features that they also have to remember. So basically, what I have given the responsibility to these players is they have to manage 6 unique characters that have already been generated. So they all have their own unique features, unique moves, different stats that I have also given to each Pokemon based off we call them temperaments. So that'll change their stats and they act like natures in the game.
Okay.
I guess I was being too harsh. They're not terrible with items. They just already have a lot to juggle with. And I have given a large amount of these items before. And if they're consumables, they're usually pretty good about it. Like potions, like, oh, I have hyper potions. And I go, how many do you have? And then they just go, oh, I don't know. It's like, you didn't write it down. And they're just like, I forgot. And I'm just like, you can't forget these things. You're just going to have an unlimited amount of hyper potions because I'm not going to remember and you're not going to remember. So write it down. They're like, you can't make me do anything. And I'm just like, God, you guys are such brats. But that's just kind of the fun interaction that comes with, if I had players that were more all about inventory management, it wouldn't be a problem. But for the most part, items are not really their forte and not really something that really interests them anyway. They're fun little plot devices that I can use. But for the most part, if I had someone who was more item focused and was all about kind of like finding treasure or needing an item to kind of move on, I would absolutely have that as an objective and kind of let that character shine.
Okay, so it seems like it doesn't really fit with your group for that part of
like
what Pokemon is.
Even with one of the magical items, it's kind of like, oh, how are you? It's like a live thing. It's like, how are you taking care of that? And they just go, I don't know. I put it in my backpack.
Right.
It's like, okay, nobody think about that too hard. Nobody think about it too hard, and we just kind of, it's not an important thing for us.
Okay.
Because it's important in the world, and it definitely helps with the journey, but with my experience and with my players, they're just kind of like, oh, yeah, they'd rather solve a puzzle, progress through story to try to move on. They don't have to be like, oh, that weird old man in the village, five towns back mentioned that he can break rocks with his fist. Maybe he knows how to smash this very smashable rock that my Geodude or my Charmeleon can't smash because for some reason he's too weak. Or there's a very particular way to smashing this boulder. Because even then too, that's kind of like that's like a mechanical reason for putting the obstacles in Pokemon games. Because it gives you a reason to go exploring. It gives you that kind of mentality to be like, oh, I need to go check these other places that I didn't explore, as opposed to regular D&D players just saying, if it was in the same town and someone in an NPC mentions it, that's a whole different situation.
Yeah, it's about like locking progression so that you have,
Yeah.
but still providing sort of multiple choices because you
Mhm.
can go here or there, and if you go to place B, you unlock something that gets you to go somewhere else in place A.
Exactly, because and when it comes to my players too, I had briefly mentioned that they were all new to D&D. So I would basically try to keep it as open-ended as possible, and I feel like that's just always going to be my philosophy about D&D. Have a problem, keep the solution open. And as long as they come up with creative ways to go about that solution, you're playing D&D, and I think that's more fun to see what everyone else can kind of contribute and find out. But I've also found myself in a lot of cases where, oh, you need this to move on just cuz. And it's like, okay. And I will tell the party too. I'll be like, okay, out of game, this mud wall that you're seeing right now in Foxglove Forest looks like it can be hosed down over time by a bunch of water Pokemon. And conveniently enough, you guys know that there's a huge amount of Poliwags in this forest that, are not on the best terms with you. So if you become friends with them, they might do you the solid of taking down this huge mud wall that's stopping this other Pokemon from moving on.
Mhm.
And they just go, oh, okay. And, they now have like a very clear objective. And being new players, that's not really their fault. So I will, in the end, if they're really confused about the story and the kind of plot points that I have listed out for them, I'll just tell them straight up. Just be like, oh, I'm not going to give you the answer right away. But if you really think about this and why, they want this, and, have them kind of chew on it a little bit. And if they're still confused, I'll be like, oh, so here's how I would think about it. Let's see what you say about it.
Yeah.
Uh, here's a DM tip. If that idea is better than what you have, don't tell them. Steal that
Right.
shit.
Yes, that's always a good rule.
Steal it and just be like, yeah. Like, here's a fun fact. I did not come up with the big bad evil corporation that's revealed in the first episode. I was originally going to have it like every other D&D Pokemon podcast, where they would just have a fun adventure where, there were almost no stakes. And Austin, my brother Jess, who plays Jess, he mentioned that he worked for this evil corporation that was just straight up trying to make zombie Pokemon. And I'm like, oh yeah. All right. now we got something. Let's go from there.
There it is.
Yeah. And so I didn't come up with it. And I will always veer the credit over to him. It was just, to me, how can I tie this in with everyone's backstory, and how heinous are they going to be, and kind of explore those details. Because I mean, making an army of zombie Pokemon is already very bad. What obstacles stand in that way? And that's the DM's job. Take the ideas of your players, help them come true, integrate them, and then give them something more on top of that. More than just kind of being the middleman for all the mechanics, because they're just going to want to live in the moment for the most part. And if they already have an end goal, help them reach that end goal. But if they don't, and they're just kind of along for the ride, try to always think about giving them a little bit more. Cater to that adventurous side of them, where they're just kind of like, oh, yeah, I like that. I want to pursue that. And have them wanting to come back to this perfectly catered experience that only you can kind of provide for them.
Right. Yeah, I think that's really good advice for how to make it more than just like a sort of video game that you're playing with friends.
That's the kind of issue that I have with modules. I played in a module where you're all given this sort of archetype. And I had picked I can't remember the actual module name. I think it was about Greek mythos. And I picked the foreigner, like the lost one.
Okay.
And I was having a lot of fun role playing this character. It was a warforged Way of the Astral Monk. So I then asked my DM at the time, I was saying, if he's a foreigner and we're both speaking common, would I have an accent? And he would just go, huh, you know what? I think you would. So I did like this Australian accent for my Warforged.
Nice.
Yeah, and I based it off Korg from Guardians of the Galaxy.
Okay.
I'd be like, "Hi, my name's Zinya. I'm a Warforged. This is not my home. I am quite lost, and I'm trying to get back." And
Yeah, that's good.
right, and he was just a fun-loving dude. But the only problem is the archetype that I picked is not very substantial, and it kind of has like its own plot line away from everything else. And the DM at the time was having a hard time really trying to tie in that archetype with the plot line that he already had or what the module was providing. So instead of kind of bending away from that, it was almost as if he was kind of sticking to the rigidity of this module. And I was just like, oh, that's kind of a bummer, because I really like this character and I would love to see how things kind of pan out if he actually gets home, you know? So,
Right. Yeah, that's been my feeling with modules too. Is I feel like I have to like keep with the module, because
yeah.
otherwise, like, there's this cascade of mistakes you could make where, like, if I do this wrong, it's going to make this other part later on also wrong.
Yeah, and that's a factor I haven't even like kind of explored too. Like, that's really good that you're pointing that out. Like, literally, I did not have to worry until now. Where if I run any module, it's like, oh, damn, I forgot this old witch lady was supposed to give this menacing message about a foreshadowing of what's to come in the future, and now this mind flare in the forest seems kind of random, you know. So
Yep.
something along those lines. So I always believe in catering that experience, and even if you use a module, for those who, you know, that's your jam, by all means, keep that module, keep the theme of it. I would just say bend it a little bit. Throw in a little bit of homebrew, just so you can keep you can keep that module and the theme on par, you know, on point, on track. But just bend it a little bit so it caters to your party member or that archetype that, you know, that seemingly doesn't fit. And as long as you give that sort of in-game reason or make it into a small journey, the player's going to eat it up. And as long as everybody else is on board with it too, go for it. My priority would just be have fun with it.
They encourage doing that with modules. It's always like, you have to fit it into your own world unless you're playing, like, I guess Forgotten Realms is what most of them are releasing for now.
Yeah. Oh my god.
And like that, you're already doing that kind of bending unless you're just doing the basic thing.
Because I don't know, you're always going to get that player who's always going to want to stick to the module for some reason. It's like, this is what I know. I have studied this forwards and backwards. I cannot deviate away from this. And I'm just like, you can. We just did. and they just
right.
and then the session falls apart, unfortunately. And it's always just a huge bummer. So I don't know. That's the advice. That's the wisdom I kind of took from that experience. It's like, oh, bend it a little bit, and everyone will just be happy. And if that's not your thing, if you really want people, if that's not your play style, and you know, just find people who play that way, and you're gonna have a great time either way. I hope you have a great time.
I did have one more mechanical question before we move on.
Yeah, sure.
I'm looking at it. Which, well, I guess it's more of a social dynamic question, because like Pokemon, as it exists outside of your game, is largely like a 1v1 experience. In the show, it's always like Ash or Misty or Brock or whoever versus
one enemy.
Yeah, one enemy, and then they introduce like double battles, but it's still like very specific, just two. But you've got like 4 players, right?
Yes.
So that has a different dynamic, and then each of those 4 can also have like 6 Pokemon, so you could potentially have some weird 24 versus whatever battle royale, which is just agonizing.
Yep. Making boss fights. I allow my players to use 2 Pokemon. I feel like that's a normal, understandable amount, still true to the games. But they have 6 Pokemon each. Some even have more than that. Like, I will let them just have like this Pokemon by their side because it's not technically a canon Pokemon. But it's exactly as you describe it, Isaac. It's literally me, and I can never have one bad guy just fight all 24 of these monsters. And like, I know exactly how strong they are because my philosophy is like Overwatch's old philosophy. Just make everything overpowered and nothing is overpowered.
Uh-huh.
What I do to kind of help compensate is I will make sure that the team stays a team. And if they can contribute somehow to the battle, I will let them. Sometimes I will have split battles, one off to the side, these two fighting another foe. I think we did that for one adventure where they both had like their kind of own boss fights or their own fights to deal with.
Uh-huh.
But in the rare case where I have to do kind of one big boss fight, I follow the Matt Colville kind of approach when it comes to giving your bad guys a memorable action economy as well as like on theme to make sure that they are going to be enough of a challenge. They are cinematically pleasing to watch and to fight. And your players just won't be able to kind of one-shot it right away. Because it's always so anticlimactic when, you know, you've been... And it recently happened to me, too, the other day. Last week, actually, when we were recording the session. I was having this Pokemon tail behind the group as they kind of went exploring into one of the kingdoms. And they are very lethal. So basically what their capability is, they're able to utilize poison to the degree where any magical effects that the party is wielding, any magical items that they might have, are going to be null for a certain amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
So I would make villain actions. They're kind of like layer actions, but need a certain trigger to go about it, to basically deal a bunch of damage with this said poison. But in this case where they use this huge move, it was like a close combat, the magical effects would either become fully null with a chance to become fully null, or, you know, just damaged, like permanently damaged.
Oh, okay.
Like you could have like here's my belt of the Cloud Giant. Is that a thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you'd be like fighting a foe who could basically cancel out that magic item's effect. And you're just like, oh, damn, that is bad news. Because once you lose that strength bonus that it gives you, you're kind of like, oh, I might be a little outclassed here, or I'm getting backed into a corner. So
right,
that's the whole gimmick of this bad guy that I made. And turns out it was literally only maybe 1.5 or 2 rounds of combat, as they all use 2 Pokemon each. And at this point, too, they have all kind of received this kind of these magical powers on top of that for saving certain kingdoms. So they're in on the fray, too. So not only is it I have to worry about all 24 of these Pokemon, plus NPCs that they've acquired that are traveling with them for the time being, and any sort of additional, you know, Pokemon that I might be missing out on.
right.
I also have to worry about them being able to feel like they're able to contribute something to the fight, because in the very beginning, it's very hard to just go from like, oh, I also want to join in the fight, but you're a human and you have the stats of an onion, you know. And when you finally get the power, it's very intoxicating to feel like I can finally do something. I'm super strong now, and not want to, you know, not join in on the fight.
Right.
It was literally supposed to be like this kind of lethal, very dangerous, bone-chilling fight that resolved itself in in-game time less than 6 seconds, or a little more than 6 seconds.
Yeah, it's always like that.
Mm-hmm. When it literally will take like an hour and a half or 2 hours to do this one round of combat. So for anybody who's trying to run like a Pokemon D&D campaign, just have them use one Pokemon. If they're trying to be like a better trainer or something, make that part of their progression. You know, don't let your characters just be able to be like, oh, hey, I'm going to cast like 2 different spells at once, and each of these Pokemon might have like extra attacks on top of that. So it's like, oh yeah, so this Pokemon's going to cast I don't know, Finger of Death. This other Pokemon's just going to cast Frost Ray, and they might do double damage because they're both super effective. And you're just like, God damn it, I'm going to take so much damage from this.
Yeah.
And it is quite rough. So I'll usually try to include some more elements to fights where they can't just focus fire on the bad guy. So there'll be layer actions. I'll try to put secondary objectives into the fight that they kind of have to take into within consideration, either having to flee from, a more dangerous threat, or you basically have to escape from this natural phenomenon that you're basically all going to die if you stay around. So I'll try to give them some secondary reasons to either not fight or divert their focus to do something else other than I'm going to hit you, I'm going to hit you, I'm going to hit you.
Right. You mentioned that the Cooperite guy in the first episode had a Magnezone. That
Mhm.
sounds like, oh, right, they have a bunch of like barrier effects.
Yeah, and literally Jess tried to run up to the Magnezone and like try to do something. But if you were up against this UFO looking magnet monster that was capable of summoning, 100,000 volts at will and be able to conjure magical, thunder, you're a Caterpie. You are a worm versus this monstrous thing. And
Yeah.
and it's very frustrating too when you're a player, because it almost makes you like, oh, my Pokemon can do stuff, but my character, the one that best represents me, is poop. And it's like, oh, that's not a good feeling, and I would get a lot of complaints from them saying like, I should be like this, I'm always running. I was like, I mean, the stats are what you rolled, and we haven't really hit like a very like a story kind of reasoning for you guys to quote unquote level up.
Uh-huh.
So, it's just kind of finding that balance. I think they're happy with how their characters are now, being these sort of big magical beings. I have put kind of limits on them a little bit, and I'm trying to help myself explore ways that maybe this magic doesn't translate well in the material plane, or maybe these magical items, have a consequence to them. Always trying to find magic as like a double-edged sword, but for now, letting them enjoy the new perks of, oh, hey, I am finally strong, and I think this best represents my character to who they want to kind of be.
Gotcha.
When it comes to like the battling aspect, I feel like my players also don't really enjoy battling. They enjoy dealing high amounts of damage. Like, I believe Jenny did a Leaf Storm, so that a 12d10 on a Graveler, and that's going to do quad damage, baby. I'm not we're not messing around when it comes to the numbers. And I think she did 497 damage.
Wow.
When this Graveler has 80 health.
All right.
So I give it like a good amount of health for like a 5e monster, right? But when you can do 12d10 and that, and you have to account for the Pokemon's like typing, it's very hard to find a nice balance with that. So what I have found out when it comes to battling these kinds of one-on-one situations, type freaking matters. When you're using a move, type matters, absolutely. But if you want to use your Pokemon in a kind of neutral situation, I will make it as cinematic as possible. But if you want the fight to go as quickly as possible, your character has to know type advantage. And my philosophy is, so there's a lot of D&D spells where you basically have to do a dexterity saving throw. And on a successful save, you still take half damage, whatever.
Right.
I find that's best for the kind of pacing for the battle. Because even if you successfully dodge, taking half damage, not only the players, also the enemies. So as long as somebody's taking damage and you're just kind of whittling everything down, it still feels like there's progression. And I have everything kind of hit relatively hard, just so the fight also goes by faster. But that also means the enemy's also going to hit you just as hard.
Gotcha.
So that's the kind of trade-off. And so instead of like And that was another thing that kind of made me not really enjoy the combat for 5e. Like, I don't want to be doing 1d8 when this guy clearly has 90 health. That's kind of, and then on top of that, I have to, these other minions are hanging around me and I have to focus my damage on them. You know, it's very rough. I'm very much a martial class only, just because my 2 brain cells just go, sword, slash. I did my job. Now you,
Right.
wizard.
Well, yeah, it's sounding kind of like the later stuff of 4th edition, where they moved away from like having big HP pools and low damage into having high damage and low HP pools, so that fights still kind of had the same outcome for how much damage and resources were consumed by the party, but were over quicker and had more fun power use, because you got to use your encounters and weren't like just using your at wills over and over again.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm kind of a sponge for some of Matt Colville's ideas. I believe that was one of his actual ideas too. Just be like, yeah, 4E is great. Please use it. It has a bunch of fun mechanics in it, especially with, you know, when I have to deal with. Normally DMs just have to deal with whoever's in the party. That's it. You know, maybe 1 or 2 familiars here and there, maybe an NPC that joins in the adventure. I guess before I go into my answer, I guess, how do you deal with the with your players' kind of armies? Do you also just like have an army counteract and be kind of like an opposing force? And when it comes to numbers, you know, air quote around numbers, you know, what's your take?
I'll answer you with kind of an analogy.
Mhm.
So there's this question that people would ask, like the writers of Star Trek: how fast does the Enterprise go? And the answer is as fast as the plot requires.
Yeah, I love that.
The warp speeds, I think, do have like actual numbers that are associated with them, but the reality is that, okay, if it can go warp 7, it's going to go warp 5. That's what's required within our listed distances for these planets, because there was damage to the warp engine or something.
Yeah.
So that it will arrive not on time, or it can go warp 7 if it needs to arrive on time. So it's kind of the same things for the armies, where it does what the plot needs it to do.
Gotcha.
So if the players aren't present, then I'll figure out what's most interesting for the resolution of that battle and try and work on some realism as well. But there's always upsets, like if like that. Very often armies have like that's a rainy day and stuff gets messed up because of that.
Yeah. I was wondering about that too. Like, do you have that kind of rely on a dice roll? Like, do you kind of have like different factions being specialized, or like having a chance to like something that makes them unique in terms of giving them a cutting edge in battle? I'm just very curious right now.
I did originally when I was trying to like actually do it mechanically, and then I moved more to this like narrative approach. And I'll sort of have like, okay, this unit is very effective in these types of terrain.
Yeah.
And then these units are okay, and then these units are like militia and they're terrible.
Gotcha.
And you can sort of get like a force idea from that for who should win in a fight, and then you can move from that into what's most like thematically interesting. And if the players are present, then usually there's some sort of like captain battle where they're facing off against the opposing captains.
Yeah, and like, oh, we're gonna handle the left wing. You get the captain for this right wing, and we'll try to meet in the middle and try to get the you know the head general for this part of the army, and like Godspeed, and then they split up, and you know.
Right, and my campaign is based off of like Greek myths, where in the Iliad this type of like captain versus captain fighting is very common. And it's thought to be that's how the Greeks fought before they developed like the phalanx warfare method. So that like captain battle then becomes the outcome decides how the main battle is decided, which usually is the players win, because that's how the game works.
Yeah. No, the players lose. What are you talking about, Isaac?
Yeah.
Make them cry. Make them have a bad time. Just waste their time.
Right. And then you play that into like how the rest of the other, like the left flank and the right flank for the NPCs that were there, how that resolves for them is based off of some outcome. Like usually it's like they're facing off against the head generals. They cut off the head of the snake of the army, and then it dissolves because these are small enough armies that everyone's seeing it.
that's always fun to do too. Like there's and I feel like the different approach to armies that you can have, like, oh, you cut off the head of a snake, as a sort of like analogy here. But what if the army turns out to be more akin to it, like a hydra? So even though you cut off the head, now you're just kind of like, oh, that just made it worse. And I feel like that's
Well, I did do that for one of the battles where
Yes!
they're up against like a necromancer. So
oh my god, yes.
they killed one of the lieutenants, and then their response to that was to like do this big necromantic ritual that brought that lieutenant and not just the bad guys that had died, but the good guys, soldiers that had died as well, back as like zombies.
Oh no! Oh my god!
Yeah. So it was like all the dead horses came back, all the dead people, and they had to like defeat the bad guy, like with all this extra stuff going on. But zombies are pretty stupid, so once they like defeated all of the necromancers that were commanding them, then it was much easier because they could sort of just back off and poke spears at them.
Yeah. Oh my god, I could already imagine like a narrative of like, oh, my player has just like been like, oh, hey, Isaac, can I have a horse? You're just like, what? Yeah, like I want to ride a horse into battle. And you go, yeah, go ahead and roll a charisma check for, I don't know, or a perception check to see if you can have like a stable master nearby or something. And it's like, oh, hey, got a 19. You're just like, oh my god, okay, I guess we're doing this horse thing. And then at the very end of it, in the war, you target the horse knowing that the necromancer is going to bring it back. And the look on your player's face would be like, you sick son of a... And then after they defeat the necromancer, they're just, the horse has like a last bit of like consciousness as they like go up to the player, before like maybe fading to dust. And, maybe your player just goes like, you know what? I think my character just hates all necromancers, and I want to pursue that. And you just go, yeah, yeah, you do, because of the horse. So, oh my god, I love that twist. You're just like, oh yeah, we won the battle, and then all of a sudden, necromancers. It's just like,
yeah, they were really worried about it going into that battle, so they're trying to come up with all sorts of things to like, how do we prevent our guys from being brought back? So like there was an earlier part of another battle where there were, okay, all these guys died. We have to like drag the bodies off the field really quick.
Oh my god, just like immediately start burning them. Oh man, I'm trying to remember who they would what war they would kind of do that same system. I think it was almost like similar to the Nazis were trying to invade Russia. Like Russia would just burn everything to the ground.
Scorched earth policy they had.
Yeah, just full on say like, yeah, you can't have our resources, even though you're greater numbers and advantages. We're just gonna cut you off from everything that you thought.
That's
you
a
were
pretty
be
traditional Russian defensive strategy. It worked against the Nazis. It worked against Napoleon.
Yes, yeah, because even Napoleon was just like, "Yo, we're gonna hit up this town, get the resources." And
Napoleon had a bit better planning than the Nazis did. Like the Nazis didn't even like purchase winter clothing for their troops that were going to Russia because they weren't really planning at all. Like even if they're going there, they're going to want winter clothing when they're occupying these places.
Mm-hmm. I mean, to be fair, like when you're fighting an enemy who literally has more men than a weapon, and they were just like, "Oh, that guy died. Use his gun." I try to like history as much as I can, and I'm usually trying to get more into the warfare and stuff because it's just so interesting that it's like actually happened.
All right, you want to talk about the Osee region now? Or...
Okay.
All right, yeah. So Osee region, that's the name of the region for the game that you're playing, and the Pokemon games are all separated into regions.
Sir.
Like the first game is Kanto, and then Johto, and then I lose track. Sinnoh, there's Galar later on. The new one is P something. Anyways, yes.
Paldea.
So yours is called Osee, Osee, and I feel like that is a joke around OC, like the acronym for original content.
I feel like there's going to be a lot of takes on this. Because I did see that where I was like, oh, that's a happy little accident because this is definitely I try to make it as original as possible. So I do like the OC part because being on Reddit and just seeing that, I was like, huh, that's a fun little accident. But it was basically just based off Orange County, which yeah, just literally and Jenny and I would go on hikes to these kinds of like nature preserves or just kind of like a desert trail and we we almost like we would go so unprepared to these trails. It'd be like 90 degrees and just humid as hell. And we'd go hiking for like 4 hours with no water. We're just wearing jeans. And we're just at some point we'd just kind of get lost and be like, oh yeah, we should probably go get something to drink because we've been sweating the whole time. And I remember just one trail, we just went in just fully unprepared. We immediately left and drove to like the nearest 7-Eleven and got some slushies. And it was just like that fun little adventure that kind of helped spark the OC region, kind of exploring like this wild nature where it's like these little hidden gems in a surprisingly suburban and metropolitan area. There are still these outcroppings of nature that you can still kind of explore. And, they're trying to be preserved as best as possible, but it's fun to just kind of explore how diverse, what you thought this suburban place was, how close nature is in its untouched form. So that was the main inspiration for the OC region. And for some of the places too, I will base them off actual locations. I believe the Lily Marsh, the fishing place where they go in the second episode.
Yeah.
Or in the second one, that is actually a place based off an estuary that we had found just conveniently. I think all together as a group, we just like went hiking as I went to go kind of gather inspiration, I think, for like world building. I think I had this kind of in mind when kind of exploring it. So it was, I don't know, write what you know is a big philosophy. Like if you can't experience it for yourself, then go experience it. Unless it's harmful, then don't do that. All right, don't don't go in a car crash. Don't do drugs. Don't do anything that hurts yourself. I will find you and I will hug you. so you don't write these stories. If you've had the displeasure of experiencing bad things to happen to you, I am so sorry. Write about them and then hopefully you never go through them again. Just a disclaimer for anyone listening. OC region though, I also based it off. I didn't want to just kind of like pull this stuff out of my butt a little bit.
Well, you made it like there's usually like a naming theme for the towns. So you went with flowers, so like Lily Marsh, like you said. What was the the Fireglove Forest?
The Begonia Cape. Yeah. There's Fire Lily Lake. Later on, there's Sauceria Town, and I had all the players name their own hometowns and kind of give them their own theme. So we have Yarrow Village, we have Hydrangea Falls, Hardy Ice Plant City, Chrysanthemum City, and I'll try to diversify the landscapes to either represent Pokemon who best live there or even endemic flowers to Southern California to best to kind of help tie in those real world experiences that I've had hiking around here and kind of exploring the mountain ranges to this fictional world that I'm trying to have a whole blend of inspiration and cultures and traditions.
Yeah, that was another question I had there was, it's like you mentioned, like California has all these different biomes within it, and Pokemon games also have all these different biomes in it because you got to have fire Pokemon and ice Pokemon, and those are very different regions they should live in. So I'm assuming you also have like there's an icy section, like maybe the Hardy Ice Plant.
Yeah. So Southern California, notoriously, like beach. When you ever think of Los Angeles, you don't think of snow. You just think of the beaches, you think of the city, and it's hard to say, yeah, ice Pokemon are here too. And you kind of have to come in, you have to think of an in-world reason why or how. Like how in this region, how are you going to justify having ice Pokemon or Pokemon that are not going to fit to just kind of roam around here, even though the place that we all know you for is supposed to be like a tropical environment. And that's where kind of being a DM comes in. You have to remember this is a fictional world, and this is your world on top of that. If you want something to kind of happen, give it a half reason. Say, I think it's like this. Come back to it later on. And if you're just like, oh, I have inspiration now to, or maybe I want to just use this trope to continue it. Like Hardy Ice Plant City. Hardy Ice Plant is a plant that is grown on like beaches. Like you can find them on sand, and they're kind of everywhere on the central coast.
They're like a little bit cold when you cut them open, not because they actually grow in the ice.
Ah, great. Yeah. So you know about them. Like you're never going to find them around ice. And so pretty much it's like, okay, so how do I justify having a city named after the Hardy Ice Plant, which doesn't grow in ice? And the thing about Hardy Ice Plant is it has actually a psychic bubble. There has not always been, it's always kind of snowing. So I took that trope of, oh, you have like the frozen north where giants and dwarves lives in the mountains, just something along those lines. It's always going to be north. It's always going to be icy no matter what you do. Game of Thrones has the wall, just in the wilds. It's always going to be hard to come up with something original that's not already been done. So if you're going to do it, give a good reasoning why. Give an interesting reason why. It doesn't have to be good as long as it's interesting. You just go, that's a nice take on it. Or because the city is basically in a bubble surrounded by always snow, always ice. The reason for that, not going to reveal why. Just know that there's a city that has a tropical climate inside this bubble, courtesy of a very powerful being in the Osee region. And that's all you're going to know for now. And if you're from that city, I'll tell you a little bit more details why. If you don't care about the city,
all right,
we don't need to talk about it.
Well, that fits like with the philosophy of Pokemon where like you're supposed to go out and explore.
Yeah. Ideally, I would like my players to be interested in all the locations that I have created. So not only will I pick flowers that are endemic to Southern California, I will I'm a big believer in flower language. So that's when flowers have a sort of symbological meaning to it. You can communicate a sense of something through this flower. So Begonia was kind of a happy accident when it comes to the symbology and the sort of, the first flower that we all kind of hear. It's supposed to mean friendships in some cultures, or I think I honestly chose it because it grew by the beach. I knew I wanted to do something with Lugia, and I think I was also trying to do a pun on like beginning.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see it now.
So like beginning by the beach also grows in California, or like and it's like a small detail.
Something with Lugia rubbing your hands together.
Yeah, something with Lugia. Let's just put that on the side. You pretend you didn't hear that. But I then looked into the symbology of the begonia, and it's like, yeah, so friendships. And I think someone said like, or another thing said like beginnings are hope. And I was like, that is awesome. How lucky am I to be able to kind of have like that beginning where the party first meet and the friendship begins. It's just like, oh, like a little happy accident. Because I think for the first three, I just kind of did what grows in a marsh, or what grows by the river and attracts a lot of bugs as the party goes into this very bug heavy forest, right? So I'm just like, okay, yeah, and that turned out to be the foxglove, and I would look into these foxgloves. I'd be like, oh, these are really cute. I'll just kind of decorate the landscape with these, so they're going to be the most prevalent thing around here.
Gotcha.
So now that I kind of have that intent to make places, keep the thematic of flowers with every village, I want to give them some more history, I guess. Like why did they pick this flower, or really hammer in the kind of legends and the reasoning why. And I think that's what world building is all about. That's what makes it so fun. It's like, why is it like this? Why is it like that? How did it end up like that?
Uh-huh.
And it could just be as simple as like, I like that flower. That's how it is for Rose City. That's one of my favorite flowers. My late grandfather, who I was very close to, he personally grew flowers in the backyard, and I always admired them.
Uh-huh.
So they were always going to have a strong presence in anything that I do. And so that's why I chose it to be one of the main hubs in this region. So I don't know, write what you like, write because it's simple, find meaning later on, change things as you need. Retcon. I mean, history is always going to be messy. You're going to have 5 people writing one story, and then one person's going to write another story, and that one person might be actually telling the truth about how some people got usurped, and they actually, it was originally named this.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so interesting to explore. But unfortunately, with my players, they just flower looks like, and then move on.
I mean, world building is usually going to be primarily for the DM, to be honest. But that's kind of why we have this podcast, for people to get that audience that they miss.
Yeah, and I love that. This is the most I've ever talked about the podcast, and it's both liberating and kind of sad, because I'm just like,
Right.
I wish I could tell my players this. And there's a very rare few people who I can talk this to, and they'll lend me an ear. And I'm always so interested in learning about other people's worlds. Like I live for that. I eat it up, because it's most of the time it's stuff that I might have thought of and never pursued, and someone else spent the time and resources. I'm like, oh, please, I need to live through you. Tell me your glorious creation.
That's what the podcast is all about.
Yeah, and that I was very honored and excited that you invited me on here. I did not think I was worthy enough. So thank you for the invite, by the way.
You're welcome. So another thing about the Pokemon games is they usually have some sort of like task for new trainers, right? And that's not quite what's happening with your group, because the Jess character has been like a trainer is an adult.
Like, she had a job. She was just a virologist. Like, she did not partake in like Pokemon battles. She just went to medical school, got her degree, and immediately just started working.
So it's completely outside of the realm of like Pokemon trainers. Usually Pokemon trainers, like, they're 10, they get their first Pokemon, and then they go to all the 8 gyms in the region and collect their badges, and then they're now a Pokemon master, whatever that means. And then sort of, who knows what happens after that.
I mean, like,
in the more recent games that kind of went away from that like gym idea to something else, where there's like the Galar had the challenges.
The challenges before
so it's still kind of like a gym battle, but it wasn't quite. Yeah. And then you only had like 3 Pokemon for the gym battle, so it was a little different. So from the initial few episodes that I've listened to, it seems like you have these like fair like contests that each town has. So there's the Fire Lily Marsh one where they had to like have the fire exhibition, and there was a few other things there, and then there was the fishing contest, and then the like battle water Pokemon at was it Fire Lily Lake and then Lily Marsh? Did I mix them up?
Yeah, I mean it's fine. I knew exactly what you meant. So they probably get it all the time.
Those 2 lilies. Does that theme kind of continue, or is there a different thing that comes up later on in later episodes?
Like I said, we've been playing for like literally 3 years in this Feywild, where it's, so I guess in context, it's almost like Narnia. Like the closest mainstream example I can give is pretty much just I Narnia'd the party. Like, they got sucked into the wardrobe, and now they're on a whole different adventure away from their regular lives. But I guess, because I knew having gym battles is kind of boring. I am a big fan of Generation 7. I know that's kind of a hot take, but I love the trials that they had. So that's when they first started venturing out away from, do this little mindless puzzle,
Gen
or
7 was Alola, right? Where there was sort of
or
like school and you had to, I
yes.
forget quite what they were doing with it.
Yeah, so they basically had you fight a totem Pokemon, which is basically this beef buff Pokemon who's been selected to be a guardian of an island, or like, and someone who helps manage that Pokemon to some degree and make sure that they're happy, they are communicating with
Oh,
the
right.
Pokemon
You had to get like the
properly.
different plates and you
And
had to like calm down all of the big mystical Pokemon by throwing their
yeah,
favorite
pretty
food at
much.
them.
Yeah, and seeing if they're like worthy and stuff. And that, it was so refreshing to me as someone who's been playing Pokemon since I was like, this is how bad my life has been affected by Pokemon. I did not speak until I started reading Pokemon names. And my parents thought I was deaf. That's how little I spoke. And then I wouldn't even like say full sentences. I would just point to stuff, and I would just like I would say give in Korean. I'd be like jo. And they were getting worried, and then I would just start branching out, be like, oh, that says Butterfree. And they're just like, oh, you can read, you can talk, you're capable of communication.
Quick, get in
and
more
speech."
Pokemon comics.
Yeah, literally. And there's a whole history of Pokemon I have there. But so when that small nugget of changing up the gym leader algorithm was finally introduced, I ate it up. So I am still not a fan of Pokemon gyms, and I think that's one of my biggest criticisms of Pokemon, because it's like, okay, so I mean, in the anime, that's fine. You know, it's a big high stakes moment that Ash trains for, and it's part of the plot. In the manga, however, Red literally fights the gym leaders as their bad guys. Like, their Lieutenant Surge, Sabrina, and Koga are all with Team Rocket, and he gets the badge after defeating them in this sort of
Yeah, he takes it off of
plot-relevant
like
way.
Lieutenant Surge's like unconscious body.
Yeah, he robs the man, and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you deserve
knocks
that.
him out,
He tried to kill
takes
you.
the badge
You're 10
and his
years old.
gloves.
Exactly. He took the gloves, and that's like why you see it with gloves, and I thought that's so amazing. That's so much more meaningful than artificially going to a gym and be like, I trained for this moment. It's like, no, I survived this deadly encounter with this 6-foot American man. I robbed him afterwards because he has some really Gucci gloves. And that just hits me a lot closer to what I'm trying to aim for when
Yeah,
it
it's
comes
much
to making
more
a story.
thematically interesting. Like the gym battles, like you said, in the anime it kind of works, and in the games it's
Mhm.
still fun because the games are different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they're programmed that way. You're expecting
but
it that way.
when you're trying to do a story, like the gym battles as a side to the story, because it's usually how they're set up, is the gym battles are happening, and you're also like facing off against Team Rocket or Team Magma or whatever. And they're entirely separate. They don't interact at all.
Right, and that's what really bums me out, because I wish Pokemon writing was so much better. It's so good when it comes to world building and Pokemon explanations, and everything about the Pokemon is fantastic. The writing for plots falls so flat sometimes, and unfortunately for the games, for the longest time, you had to do gym battles. There was no other way to progress other than gym battles. And I don't know, it just, I'm kind of sick of it. I still have not bought Sword and Shield. Because the whole boycott that everyone tried to do when it came to the graphics, the the national dex cut, and I was just like, I don't like getting spit on. Pokemon and Game Freak, please stop doing this to me. I mean, I'm still very loyal to our number one media franchise in the world, but I don't. I'd like to change it up with the power that I have over the tiny bubble that I call the
Gotcha.
OC region. So I had it where the Indigo League was not part of it. I wanted, and there's a lot of cultures in Orange County as a whole.
Yeah.
In IRL, you have so many diverse groups of underrepresented minorities, as opposed to like what is handpicked by media stations or just kept exclusively to that culture. I love exploring every single one of those, giving it the appreciation that they deserve, and staying, not staying within this homogenous area of, oh, I am Korean, therefore I must only enjoy Korean things. There's that sense of pride that comes with being a certain nationality. I love learning more about, oh, hey, in Vietnam they have this dish, and I'm like, that's wild. Or like, hey, I'm Laotian. I was like, I've never met a Laotian person before. It is very nice to meet you. Please tell me more if you know more, and if you would like to. And even exploring more of the Latin American cultures too. Like, I don't think I ever really explored El Salvador as a culture, and it's not like someone's coming up to be like, hey, you want to learn more about this place, this obscure place? It's like, it's like, no, I have to go out and learn about it. Like, that fictitious monster is quite famous, El Silbon in Latin America. He's like a guy who like whistles in the night and punishes drunkards and adulterers and people who stay passed out at a certain time. The boogeyman of Latin America and Mexico. And I found that to be so fascinating, because I'm like, that's creepy as hell. I love it. I need to know more about it. And not just, other cultures, my own culture too, like Korean. And I'm a big fan of Native American culture too. And on top of that, it's like, why limit yourself to just gym battles when you can literally explore a entire region with actual people, with, living cultures that have, survived to this day? Why are you going to waste that time having the trainers do a battle that they are training for, that's like, oh, here's a fun gimmick, go battle now, as opposed to like, hey, why not partake in this very specific, very nuanced challenge or tradition that is either being revived or still in practice, and enjoy that for what it is, and be a part of these people and the land and the culture. So that was my main take for the OC region. I wanted it to feel like it's full of all these diverse people. That I don't know if this might be like a double-edged sword. I gave no race to the OC region. Ideally, like, everyone's going to have a different sort of appearance to them. White, Hispanic, Black, Asian, whatever. And they don't see that. They only see groups, families, cultures. There's only, and I'm not saying we should, we shouldn't acknowledge the diversity that we have. I'm just saying, for simplicity's sake, for my world, there's no bigotry against anybody for the way that they look. There's going to be some fun competitiveness between regions, and there's definitely going to be a plethora of fun cultures and, explorations of what people used to do, before their time, and how they help preserve it, how that made them into the group that they are, and everything about that. Yeah, that was basically what I really wanted to hammer home. Like, these are distinct groups that have survived till now, and the players are just lucky individuals who now get to explore the world with a greater mission, but also enjoy and meet the people who they are protecting.
Okay.
And so instead of like, oh, I need to go here to progress the story, it's I am enjoying the journey along the way by meeting the people who I am, who I'm trying to save, and basically exploring the home where they live.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, one of the other questions I had was like, what's the overall culture of the OC region? And it seems like you pretty well answered that just
Oh,
then.
yeah, it's always diverse, and I have the misfortune of, again, being in the Feywild. So I had to put a pause on like finding out different cultures, or like how each town or how each kind of group community do certain things, and I haven't thought about that in a long time. And I really miss it
Mhm.
as I learn more about other people's cultures and whatnot. So I'm always open to like taking
Well,
suggestions
what
and
I would
stuff.
do
I
for
think
the Feywild is that there's all sorts of different like folk tales that different people have. So the Feywild is based off of like Celtic folk tales, basically. But we have,
yeah.
there's folk tales from every different culture, so you could always bring
Mhm.
some of those in.
Yeah, because here's the thing, because I kind of did that a little bit later in. I think about halfway through, I was like, oh, I'm in a land of fairy tales. I can just use actual fairy tales, combine them, and give them a Pokemon twist. And only I would know that, unfortunately. Like, my players would never find out unless I
Hmm.
specifically told them, or if the listener actually knew these stories. I think so they're in this kind of ice section right now. And what I've basically done here is, hopefully don't listen to this, I've combined, I think, 4 stories all together.
Oof.
Yeah, like 4 actual fairy tales combined into basically one larger picture, all kind of revolving around one pivotal character that the party has kind of grown to like. She claims that, oh, I just want to be on the winning side. And, it turns out that she's a much more complex character with all these fairy tales kind of pointing at, oh, here's the kind of backstory. And, I try to do in-depth stories like that. And yeah, so a lot of it is, I think one of them is this British story that I had never heard of, where there was or was it Nordic? I can't remember. Dang. It was like a chalice that would never go empty.
Well, there's a lot of myths about that.
And right, and so it was like a horn that would never go empty, and it was like stolen or something. So I incorporated that. I incorporated this another story where I think it was a Native American mythology where this bird was friends with the sun, something along those lines. And why the evergreen tree is always green in winter. Tied those stories in together. I tied in the story of the little matchstick girl.
Oh, okay. I don't usually think of that as a folktale, but I guess it is.
Yeah, right? Like, I guess how would you classify that? Because I always figured it was like a very grim just story that's like that also just takes place in like winter.
How would I classify that? I guess that's more of like a tall tale than a folktale,
Mhm.
because it's a more modern story in
Mhm.
how it's represented. And I guess tall tales usually, within the way we think of them in American culture, are usually based off of real people. I don't know if the Little Match Girl is, but like Davy Crockett, Paul Bunyan, and all these other people were actually real people,
Yeah.
but then they got all these like fantastical stories told about them.
Yeah, I was literally just listening to the Johnny Appleseed one. Yeah, I just any sort of story that feels like it could fit, I would put in there. And I would gather from all sorts of culture. So, it's an amalgamation, and it always will be, because I think we'll thrive in real life as a society if we can start, making our story together with the stories we already have.
Mhm.
That's just my own philosophy that I'm just, shoehorning into to the campaign.
Gotcha.
But I do believe that, you know, everyone is good. People are good. I'd like to believe in the humanity that we all bring to the world table. And that's why the OC region is they live in peace for the most part. There are some people who wish to disrupt that peace for their own kind of selfish gains, which is, Cooper. And once we kind of figure out why Cooper is doing all this, is it just because they're purely evil? Is it because of this decisions of like one person, or why could they possibly just want an army of zombie Pokemon? And
how could you say no?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, I mean, I'll take any Pokemon, zombie or not. But yeah, it's just fun to explore the good in people, what they all bring to the table as separate communities, and that's the kind of culture, this kind of ever-growing pot of, it's literally kind of what America intends to be, the melting pot, but I think it's more known better as like a stew, because certain cultures don't want to give up and blend, become homogenized with American culture. They still want to stay a rich, a very much secluded part that other people can celebrate with them, and I full on respect that as well. So that's kind of another take on it. It's just like, oh yeah, we're Fire Lily Lake. We just climbed this spire because one of the elders from long ago saw this crazy fire pillar in the distance, and they were so moved that they created this as a trial to see who would become the next leader of the village.
Right.
And it's like, that's wild. Where's that pillar from? And then we actually find that out later on, but
not there yet.
Yeah, I haven't edited that far yet either, so it's not anyone's fault. But yeah, so everything kind of ties in together. People are not alone in this, and everyone. I want the region to feel alive, and the culture helps the players feel connected to the region, and not have it feel so gimmicky as like gyms.
Right. One of the things I was really curious about was, did you have any like original Pokemon for it? Because each of the like game regions comes with these new Pokemon, and up to the point I've listened to, I haven't seen any yet.
So when it comes to original Pokemon, we're actually very close to meeting some of the first ones, and I actually have. So Jenny ordered me a shirt of all the Fakeamon that we've made so far. Cool. Yeah, and I don't know if I want to reveal them yet, but we do have some Fakeamon on the way. I do have this huge Google Doc just full of like original Pokemon that I'd like to do. I do have like one that's like fully fleshed out and I really enjoy it, and it has like a great in-lore reason of like why it is. I do want to do like a lot of regional variants. I will base them off actual animals endemic to Southern California. So I always want to try to tie something into the region where it's inspired from. Symbologically, where can I put them the best? Where they're going to make the most sense? Here's a fun fact about me, and hopefully this is not detrimental to my reputation, but Jenny and I were very much into hamsters. And at one point, I believe, and this is with like a new litter, we had, I think, 30 hamsters in our room. Oof. And each of these hamsters had their own bin. And we just lived like this, and it was insane. And looking back, I have no regrets. They were all so cute, and I love them all. And so I guess that's a small reveal of what the first Fakeamon's going to be. It's going to be, so if you're tuning into this very special episode with Mr. Isaac here, then this is your treat if you listen. That was the first Fakeamon that we kind of did. So in terms of original Pokemon, I'll probably just refer to them as Fakeamon. Like I think the Pokemon community has just adopted that term.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So hamsters are the first Fakeamon. They're this was like before Morpeko was even a thing in Generation 8. So call me Game Freak. I got ideas. Hit me up, hire me. Just not to do any of the programming because we need.
Well, is that really the first rodent one? Like, wasn't Togemaru.
Yeah,
Nice.
Togedemaru was a the porcupine. No, not the porcupine, the hedgehog. Because the first hamster is Morpeko, I think.
What's that other like cute electric one? A Dendine?
Oh, Dedenne is a dormouse. And that's why it's a fairy type, just because like the dormouse is that kind of mouse that's in Alice in Wonderland.
Okay, all right, yeah. So the little cute rodent, but not quite a hamster. All right.
Right. So there's so many Pika clones, and it's like I got the jump on Game Freak when it came to hamsters, but I'm just so mad that they made them evil because all my hamsters were very loving, except for one, and I made a campaign about how he killed his father. Yeah, it was a very dark day for us. He got out of the cage and attacked his dad, and his dad looked like didn't even fight back, and unfortunately he died from the wounds, and it was so, man, it was devastating.
Well, that's hamsters for you.
Yep. So R.I.P. S'mores. Shout out to S'mores. if you're listening, just type in the comment, hey, we love you, Isaac. Shout out to S'mores. Rip S'more.
All right.
But yeah, so we do have a long list of original Pokemon coming in. I was actually very lucky to have a very talented artist make these hamster Pokemon for us, and I think they're kind of well known in some communities. I think they also made the logo or some of the artwork for Loxton and Noggin on YouTube. They're a big Pokemon creator, content creator. So I was very lucky to work with them, and it's not very cheap. And the only thing is, too, I don't monetize the podcast. It makes me feel icky. I'm not like saying don't go for the money, don't try to get that, don't try to make this do a hustle. I just personally don't like, hey, I'm creating this
like you said, it's like a family memory kind of thing for you.
Yeah,
like
it
the
was
initial interest, and then like I don't want to sell my family photos to make money. That feels
just because I know gross. I'll get money. Yeah, and I'm just like, man, the art's always going to be expensive. Like I got a whole wall of like watercolor artwork behind me, like the physical copies of like all these Pokemon and the journey that we've taken so far. And I recently had to switch artists, so I got to pay again for pretty much all that art, and I got to find a good enough Fakeamon artist who can work with our budget, because this is basically all coming out of pocket when it comes to all the equipment, the mixer. I think, because I would have never bought this mixer had it not been for Mima. I think it was like $500 to be able to record each track separately onto an SD card. Every mic is, I think, $30 to $50. All the mic arms are also pretty pricey at like $20 to $30. And I'll try to get things on sale, but a lot of it is just an investment to make sure everything comes out the way I want it to. So I would like to find the time and resources to be able to be like, yep, I got these original Pokemon, and I am very proud to show them. But at this point in the story, we have not really met any. I've introduced a couple, and maybe even some kind of a differently typed Pokemon in the Feywild. But other than that, we're just gonna have to wait and see how they will turn out. So a long-winded answer. Yes, we have original Pokemon. Okay. They are coming. I have conversion evolutions. I have regional variants. Like I want to make a Whale Lord killer whale that is specifically the culture to the killer whales that preside or come to Southern California. And apparently killer whales have different cultures and different things that they like to do as a pod, which is fantastic. And I'm going to play into that. Yeah. So little fun things like that. I'm trying to tie in the actual real life biology and science to these fictional creatures with the limited facts that I'm told by a 10-year-old who filled out this Pokedex for Professor Oak. So they are coming.
You've also got like the villains in the OC region, so the Kuparai organization that's trying to make the zombie Pokemon.
Yes, sir.
Did you want to talk a bit more about them?
Sure. So I think the first time that they meet the masked person. So that hasn't even been revealed to them yet. And currently, when we get out of the Feywild, we are going to go straight to the hometown of one of the players to get that just huge direct intake of OC of OC region from the Feywild, because I've been missing it. I know the players are going to be missing it and want to explore one of the players' hometowns, and then there they'll get to have a very fateful rematch with the first villain that they ever met. That was just kind of like a mysterious plot hook device as well, and it gives a lot for the DM to kind of work with, especially if you put like a big fish in front of them that they're not able to catch. It's kind of gimmicky, but as long as they feel like, oh, okay, there seems to be some reasoning why they just kind of teleported away. And as long as that reason is good enough, the players will always kind of accept it and just be like, damn, that guy must be really strong, and just kind of, it's just something you kind of have to just convey and be upfront about.
Yeah.
Because it's also very frustrating for a player, and I've learned this a very hard way, where they're just kind of like, it's a tough opponent. You were supposed to run away. And they're just like, how was I supposed to know that? It's like, oh, this is when I tell you the stuff that you're supposed to know, because it's easy for me to know that.
Yeah, it's even harder to do that in Pokemon, where like you have like super effective moves, so those could take down a Pokemon really quickly, and it's not necessarily an indication that you need to run.
Yeah, so I will try to usually find like direct counters to the party's Pokemon, a kind of like a foil to them. So that's always kind of fun to explore too, because as a characters kind of develop more of how they think, how they act, where are their values, I could then make villains based off, hey, maybe this villain likes the same thing, they just pursue it in a different way, or maybe this villain is further down the path than you are, and they see their kind of naivety in you and they want to stop you. Maybe this guy's just unhinged. I know in the Rock and Rolla Highlands episode, there's just one guy who's just a history buff. Like, he loves legendary Pokemon and he loves comedy. And those are his like two main features. He's just supposed to be this kind of lunatic, obsessive dude who has a superiority complex, loves legendary Pokemon. That's why he was hired by Kuparai to maybe give insight into that. So not only does he have a role for this obsession, it just makes him seem crazier. And sometimes you just have to make the villains just regular villains. Like, so many times we get in cartoons like, oh yeah, this guy's just bad because he's bad. Or you try to get the meta villains, which are very popular nowadays, like, oh, I had to do this because I was forced to, because my family was in this position and I don't see a way out. And you just go, damn, that sucks.
That is a very popular anime trope.
Yep. And I find myself trying to do that a lot. So, I'm trying to stop. I'm trying to kind of hold back from that, because it is very easy to fall in that and try to get sympathy with that. But murder is murder. At the end of the day, it's like, you killed people. I don't know if I really like you, but,
Luigi is an animal. They're not people.
Yeah, but like... but
I know, later on.
So I usually try to do an array of villains. I will try to do manipulative. I'll try to do secretive. I'll try to do unhinged. A whole plethora, as long as they make sense as to why they're in Kuparai.
What's that other like recurring sort of, you do like the James voice for him, Hunter something?
Adam Hunter. He's just yep, he's a minor antagonist. His heart's in the right place, but his methods are just questionable. So that's just a fun villain to do. He's like, I'm Adam Hunter, archaeologist. That belongs in a museum. Just like, what if Indiana Jones was a little bit more rude and more flamboyant? You know, it's like he just comes in, robs somebody, and it's like, dude, that's not okay.
It's very British of him.
Yeah, so just a very fun trope to just kind of explore. And it's like, yeah, he doesn't mean ill intent. He just wants to help preserve the history of the culture because I mean, in a place where you don't have you've actively fought against bureaucracy and other, and so the OC region is laden with like these untapped raw resources that other regions have tried to get into as well.
Right.
Specifically the Sinnoh region, which it neighbors via a very jagged pass known as Onyx Ridge. And I got the inspiration after looking at what regions were kind of neighboring each other, similar to like how Kanto was next to Johto.
Uh-huh.
So I noticed on the Sinnoh map, the old Sinnoh map, there's literally some mountain passes that are to the bottom left over by like the starting town. And I basically drafted it up as, yup, that's a whole nother region. They're pissed at them because they couldn't take their stuff. And they just like, oh, that's nothing over there. Those Sinnoh region's the best. We don't talk about the OC region. So there's that kind of regional rivalry that's there. But going back to the main point of Adam Hunter, basically wanting to preserve these plethora of cultures that could maybe disappear at any moment, should there be no community members still thriving. And it's not like every tradition is going to be good. Like, what if we come across this other tradition that's like, oh, yeah, they secretly praise Giratina, right? The devil. So they just collectively get a certain kind of Pokemon because they thought, oh, hey, this Pokemon's supposed to bring good fortune. And then they sacrificially murder it. It's like, okay, that's not great. Should it be preserved? I guess, maybe.
Okay.
So, not every... I plan to have it where not every tradition in the OC region is going to be fantastic. Like, some are just going to be archaic. Some are going to be outdated. And it's not really intrinsically their fault. It's just that maybe this group of people have just been so entrapped in their own bubble. It's almost like a refusal to change. Like, they don't have to do that anymore. There's science prevalent, and there's other resources that they have to that they have access to, but they still keep doing this one thing, and that just might be to the detriment of the community.
Yeah.
So it's fun little things like that when you can kind of explore, like, okay, so this culture wants to preserve its traditions. Great. When does that become a problem? When does it become good? When does it become a problem? Like in Lily Marsh, I'm thinking right now, what if they stopped doing the fishing competition because they started decimating the local ecosystems?
Right. Yeah.
And after letting it restore for an amount of time, maybe you can just start it back up. Finding that balance is always key. And maybe some places, some communities just haven't found that balance yet. So it could be either up to the party to say, hey, we'll help you, or that's, or just kind of accept the way things are, or, they're always going to have a different approach. So I try to keep that open-ended. So that could be another antagonist too. Just the blissful ignorance of people, opposing the values of the party. Anybody that kind of opposes the party in terms of like values, automatically going to be an antagonist.
Yeah. Yeah. Minor antagonist.
Yeah. And Adam Hunter is fun because he means well. His methods are just kind of not respectful. And as long as you can kind of see where he's coming from it's like, okay, he's not a bad guy. He's just an idiot with a bird. So, and so that it greatly upsets the people, and the party's like, hey, we like these people, so hey, Adam Hunter, you got to stop doing what you're doing. And Adam's like, never. Just an unwillingness to change.
Yeah.
So finding little villains like that is always going to be fun too. Like I could just come up with someone who just like a grumpy old man. He's like, hey Jess, I don't like you. It's like, okay, yeah, I don't like you. All right, I'm gonna leave. And I mean, in Fire Lily Lake, she literally gambled with a dude, like the equivalent of like a homeless man who's just like, hey, I'll bet with you. And she's like, okay.
Oh yeah, that guy.
Yeah, Sean isn't even his real name. So it's like, I will make a bet. And Jess is like, okay, if I win, you have to be my involuntary companion. And I guess that's an antagonist, because if she loses, then then she loses some resources. But he ends up tagging along for the journey.
Yeah.
So it's always fun to explore a range of antagonists and villains. They don't always have to be high stakes, and I think that's what makes it more fun and enjoyable. And that's what, if you have fun, smaller villains, it just makes your heroes look better, and it also makes your bad guys look way, way cooler. Especially with how heinous it just immediately turns. Because like you just go like, I'm Adam Hunter, or like, I'm Sean, please bet with me. Oh no, I lost. Versus, hey, my name is Jay. We used to be schoolmates together. You didn't take this position. I did. So I hurt your grandmother. I stole her Pokemon, which have been prevalent in your life, and they are now half my slaves. What are you going to do about it?
Mm.
And it's like, oh, okay, that got amped up and real personal real quick. And, it allows the player to kind of have that switch to serious mode, as opposed to like, oh, having a fun adventure to being like, there's real stakes to this, and it feels like real people are getting hurt by these actual people, and they need to be stopped.
Right.
So I like having the whole spectrum, as well as having the polarity and the tonal shift that each villain makes. And there's one overarching bad guy, and I will say he's based off the one of the main antagonists for Red Dead Redemption 2.
Oh, okay.
He's based off Dutch Vanderland.
Of course.
Mm-hmm. So he's too interesting of a character not to kind of have as a villain for the campaign. So we'll get to explore kind of what he's doing, why he's doing it. So another bonus, little biscuit, little piece of candy. Here's another rare candy. Thanks for sticking around.
Well, I think we've hit all the points that I wanted to get to. Did you have anything that you wanted to cover that we didn't get to yet?
I guess the Pantheon.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So legendaries play a big part in the OC region. I plan to have them kind of be like all have some sort of like all have like the little legendary toe in the water here. Just because of all the untapped resources and land, and even Volcanion gets a sort of a big story element to it as well for one of the arcs. But on top of that, I have also taken my own creative liberties when it came to the Creation Trio. There are additional guardians in space based off Chinese folklore, which I also found interesting. And there's even some crazy star Pokemon that I'll base off the Greek constellations.
Okay.
Because I love stars. I love learning about every culture, every aspect of it, and any sort of mysticism that comes behind it, and any story will just grab me.
So you doing like the star signs, or like Aries or Sagittarius, that kind of thing?
I'll probably do Sagittarius, because I did recently learn more about that story, because that one was very interesting. I'll have to double check, because that's how my brain works. I literally listen to all this stuff, and then the week passes, and it's like, oh, it's gone. Bye. But
yeah,
I recently did one for Orion, where basically Orion came to life they were a giant cosmic Sirfetch'd from Pokemon Sword and Shield.
Right.
And, I wanted to pick a Pokemon who best represents a warrior. And so with that kind of warrior motif, made the connection, gave the reward to the player, and, basically helped start to tie in this huge cosmic pantheon, the minions, the hierarchy that resides within space, other than, who we already know. Yeah, we're going to see more legendaries in the Osee region as we go along, too.
Didn't want to go with Decidueye for Orion.
Oh, I could have. I felt like, yeah, it's actually better, huh? Hindsight's a bitch. I mean, Sagittarius can also be. It's like a weird horseman, though.
Yeah, there's so many horse ones. I feel like you're kind of locked into one of those for
Yeah.
Sagittarius.
Dang.
I mean, you could also try and, for Sagittarius, like, I think that has an elemental connection to it as well, so you could try to work that in with which horse you pick.
Yeah. Dang, I really had a nice burst of inspiration just from that story about Sagittarius. It's the son of a god who was put into hiding because of Zeus, I think, and raised by someone else or something. It's a whole crazy thing, and I will just nab that and just be like, yep, let's put a Pokemon twist on this. And I shouldn't use Decidueye. I don't know why I didn't for Orion.
Well, don't worry about it.
Yeah, I know. I will consult you next time, Isaac. But I think, I don't know, for anybody that listens, thank you for being patient. I haven't really published anything in a while. Work's been hectic. Got a lot of stuff cooking in the back. I have some music that I'm getting commissioned right now as a big main theme for everybody, getting all the artwork all prepped up. I'll probably announce that new artist in a little bit. Once I get that next episode up, we're about to hit 10,000 downloads.
Woo!
Real soon. So we'll be doing a giveaway for that. And let me know if you want some stickers. I finally bought some envelopes and stamps so I can send those out. And I've been meaning to. I've been sending. I have to send those out.
Got your little Patreon bonuses.
No, just I have so many stickers. I got them from work. I literally paid half price because I work at a sticker company.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to charge for these. Again, it feels weird to ask for money. I mean, I do have a Patreon where that does help support the podcast a lot. Like literally, I think after a long time, because a lot of the money would go to the artwork that we were getting, but now that we're changing artists, a lot of the money is helping to kind of sustain the podcast as it is with the hosting sites and everything. So thank you to everyone that supported us. If you listen in, thanks for being patient. Thank you so much to Isaac for allowing me to be on his podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Matt.
Yeah, thanks for letting me talk so much. My voice is going hoarse just
yeah,
talking
we're
about
at 3 hours now.
But thank you so much for the chance, for the privilege. It means a lot to me. I really enjoy this. I've been meaning to listen to your whole podcast and find out more about these worlds, and maybe I can get more inspiration. And
yeah, that's the whole deal.
Yeah, and steal the ideas. I mean, get inspired by them.
Of course.
But yeah, that'll do it for me. Big thank you to everyone who listened. Big thank you to Isaac for having me.
All right, cool. Thank you. If you like learning about the Osee Pokemon podcast, you can learn more about them by searching them on the web or on your podcast app. Osee, O-S-E-E, Pokemon Podcast.
We're still looking for people to interview, so if you or someone you know
might want to appear on the podcast, please let them know. Our web address is gocorral.com/STS. GOCORRAL.com/STS. Thank you.